This old man pretended to be weak and sickly to avoid the tax officer's inspection. But when this handsome young man entered with a hammer, his face turned as green as a frog's bottom. Because he had heard many rumors about this sickly genius, despite the warnings of his superiors, he used a hammer to smash the old man's house. I will take full responsibility. But unexpectedly, behind the wall was a shocking secret. The man had to stand on the edge of a cliff watching the police retrieve his father's car from the lake. The police determined it was an accident, but after receiving his father's belongings and a tattered notebook, he determined that someone had secretly harmed his father. His father is a National Tax Service employee. And what is a National Tax Service employee? They are people at the forefront of the anti-corruption movement, helping the state manage businesses and prevent inflation from occurring. Dong-doo's father spent his entire life fighting against the BQ conglomerate, a group of tycoons who use dirty money to bribe dozens of high-ranking government officials and engage in dark and evil activities. Despite repeatedly facing consequences, even imprisonment, Dong-doo's father never gave up. Dong-doo, however, completely contradicted his father's ideals. He used his knowledge to help businesses launder money and evade taxes. Does Dong-doo resent his father? Of course he does. Because he was abandoned by his father in an orphanage from a young age, he grew up without feeling any love. Only when he became an adult did Dong-doo realize that everything his father did was for the sake of the nation. And since his father's death, Dong-doo decided to change and become a true auditor. He was standing on the edge of a cliff looking down at the deep, cold river where his fake father had thrown himself. There was no return. The police said it was a car accident caused by loss of control. But Dong-doo knew it wasn't as simple as it seemed. Because he was an employee of the National Tax Bureau. But what are National Tax Bureau employees? They are the pioneers in the anti-corruption movement, helping the state manage businesses and prevent inflation. Dong-doo's father was one such person. His whole life he fought against the BQ conglomerate, those who use dirty money to bribe dozens of high-ranking state officials and carry out dark and evil acts. Despite repeatedly facing setbacks, even going to prison, Dong-doo's father never gave up. This made him determined to quit his old job and become a tax bureau employee to investigate his father's death. At the funeral, Dong-doo met Hee-rang, his father's junior at the tax bureau. Through her, Dong-doo learned that his father had found important evidence but then had an accident. There were no security cameras on that stretch of road. The black dot on the car had also disappeared. Dong-doo became suspicious. This wasn't simply an accident. Among his father's belongings, Dong-doo actually found the notebook and USB drive. This was the evidence Hee-rang had mentioned. But only the cover of the notebook remained. Perhaps this was what brought his father misfortune. Dong-doo decided to quit his old job, handing over the list of tax-evading businesses to a friend who was a prosecutor. Dong-doo wanted to become an employee of the National Tax Bureau to finish Jang-doo's work for his father. The next day, Dong-doo went to the tax bureau's interview. He easily passed the other candidates and was accepted to work at the bureau. This is the worst performing tax bureau. They're having a headache. With a baseball player's tax evasion case, the amount of tax owed is $2 billion. He's even preparing to fly to America to compete, and the subordinates can't handle it. Because the athlete is a real gangster. Dong-doo, who just got hired, bravely asked the bureau chief to let him handle this case, dealing with scum. Dong-doo confidently believes he's the best. The police chief is somewhat skeptical of Dong-doo's abilities, and wants to test him this opportunity. Indeed, to deal with scum, you have to use scum. Dong-doo locked the athlete's car and went up to greet him naturally. He read aloud the athlete's crimes in front of the journalists. If these charges were made public, the athlete would be unable to enter or leave the country. He quickly snatched the indictment and found a place to negotiate with Dong-doo. He was led to the training ground. The athlete turned against Dong-doo and had someone ambush him, but he remained unfazed. I have the nickname King Lai Don. The athlete had to bribe Dong-doo with 100 million. Both to keep him quiet and to get him to help him resolve the trouble. He tried to manipulate Dong-doo into paying $2 billion in taxes to the treasury, saying Dong-doo could live comfortably with 100 million. Dong-doo pretended to agree to the compromise and left with the bag of money. However, the next day he went to the athlete's house again. The money from yesterday had already been paid to the tax office, but now the athlete still owed $1 billion. Dong-doo gave the athlete two options: pay the remaining tax or wait for the police to arrest him. Dong-doo recorded the entire scene of the athlete giving him a warranty. With this evidence, he couldn't escape punishment. The athlete smiled again and snatched Dong-doo's USB. He told Dong-doo what kind of power he must have in Korea to be able to evade taxes until now. Dong-doo remained unafraid. He had already prepared an indictment to send to the club the athlete was about to join in America. Would they accept a scoundrel like him? The athlete switched to reconciliation, asking for a tax reduction. Now, the athlete doesn't even have 1.9 billion and is flying in a month. How can he earn enough money in such a short time? Dong-do made a previous suggestion when helping businesses evade taxes. Dong-do had connections with some foreign betting platforms. The purpose was to help businesses launder money. They gave the corrupt money to the betting platforms to operate and then shared the profits. Before flying to America, the athlete had one last match in South Korea. The odds for this match were 1/20th. If the athlete didn't participate and the team lost, he would win 2 billion if he bet just 100 million. However, the athlete wanted to leave the country in glory, being cheered by everyone. Dong-do told him that if he didn't pay enough taxes, he wouldn't be able to leave, and his career might even be ruined. Finally, after a long period of agonizing, the athlete decided to follow Dong-do's advice, and the athlete's tax evasion case was resolved. He was tricked badly by Dong-do and had to bitterly go to prison for gambling, but he paid all his taxes. The police chief was extremely satisfied. Finding a talent like Dong-do is not easy. From then on, Dong-do's career soared. 4 years later, Dong-do was sitting and listening to a lecture on morality at the headquarters of the National Tax Bureau. During the meeting, Dong-do noticed 3 people, the director and 2 deputy directors. After following the clues in his father's case, Dong-do knew that these 3 people were crucial links in finding the murderer who killed his father. The first person Dong-do tried to approach was Deputy Director Intazun. He is a candidate for the next director position. However, if the current director deliberately obstructs and sides with Deputy Director Kim, Tun will have no chance. Dong-do is confident he can help Tun deal with Deputy Director Kim. Although Tun has heard a lot about Dong-do's achievements, he can't completely trust him yet. He needed time to think. After leaving the office, Tae-jun ran into Deputy Director Kim. The two were vying for the director position, glaring at each other with murderous eyes. They exchanged a few sarcastic remarks and then passed each other. That evening, Dong-do returned to Department 1, packed his belongings, and prepared for a transfer. Tae-jun asked Dong-do to come to Department 5 to observe his work. After 4 years of working at Department 1, Dong-do had a very good relationship with Chief Nuo. She knew that Dong-do's original purpose in coming here was to investigate her, because 4 years ago, Chief Nuo was also present at the scene of the accident. She gave Dong-do a chance to express his concerns, but having been by Chief Nuo's side for 4 years, Dong-do knew she wasn't a bad person, so he smiled happily, having nothing to ask. Dong-do wished Chief Nuo good luck in her work and then confidently turned and left. Chief Nuo felt a little guilty. In her heart, it seemed she really knew something. Later, Dong-do returned home, and in the room were all the clues Dong-do had gathered over the past 4 years. Dong-do's father's target was the PQ group. As a result, his father was framed by Lawyer PQ and ended up in prison. Dong-do had held a grudge against Lawyer PQ since childhood. A gentleman's revenge is never too late, even after 10 years. Waiting until he grew up, Dong-do helped businesses evade taxes to attract the attention of Lawyer PQ. As expected, he sought Dong-do's cooperation. Dong-do got hold of PQ Group's weakness and immediately went back to inform his father. His father advised his son not to get involved. Dong-do's father wanted to accomplish his great deed on his own, unafraid of going to prison. Seeing his father refuse his help, Dong-do was extremely angry. He left, abandoning his father, unaware that it would be the last time. The two of them had a chance to talk, and upon returning to reality, Dong-do still felt conflicted. He checked the information for Department 5, where he would be working tomorrow. Bureau 5 is known as the battlefield. Bureau Chief No once reminded Dong-do to pay attention to one person, which was Department Head Jiang Wu-jiang. He was a capable person. He could tell whether someone was evading taxes just by glancing at the monthly income and expenditure list. However, Wu-jiang was being held back by Bureau 5's chief and couldn't develop his talent. The next day, Dong-do went to the 5th Bureau to take up his post. This place was like a battlefield, and Dong-do tried to stay away from the trouble as much as possible. Outside, he met the head of the 5th Bureau, and Chong-kai. Hearing Dong-do's name, and Chong-kai was also a little worried, because rumors about Dong-do had spread throughout the tax bureau. He was said to be unconventional and extremely difficult to manage. And Chong-kai tried to remain calm and assigned Dong-do some menial tasks. He went in to clean the office. While Dong-do was arranging documents on Wu-jiang's desk, He-rang unexpectedly came to submit her resignation. She couldn't stand the work attitude of the department, saying that this was a garbage collection place but they actually thought it was a garbage dump. Dong-do showed up to greet an old acquaintance. He-rang was extremely surprised by Dong-do's appearance. She decided not to quit anymore. Hee-jung believes that if Dong-do is here, the 5th Bureau will have a different face. At this time, Deputy Director Kim has an appointment with reporter Chok. She wants reporter Chok to write an article revealing that Chairman Chun of the pharmaceutical company is evading taxes and selling counterfeit drugs to profit from the people. Reporter Chok is a little nervous because he heard that the person behind Chairman Chun is Tun. This is also Deputy Director Kim's main target. She wanted to attack Chairman Chun to shake Tae-jun's position. The file contained investigation documents. Regarding Chairman Chun's illegal activities, all the reporter needed to do was find more direct evidence to convict him. Then, the reporter and his associates ambushed Chairman Chun's house. In the evening, the old man's mistress was seen carrying a large bag into the house. According to the reporter's speculation, the bag certainly contained embezzled money. The reporter waited until morning to see Chairman Chun's mistress come out. The reporter decided to press her. Did she bring money to Chairman Chun? Although the mistress denied it, people still flocked to Chairman Chun's house demanding compensation. Tae-dun saw the news and was extremely worried. Chairman Chun was also restless inside the house. He decided to call the head of Department 3, Jiang Ronghai, to ask for his help. Director Jiang was Tun's loyal henchman and also the intermediary between Tun and Chairman Chun. He advised Chairman Chun to destroy the money. Without evidence, the tax bureau couldn't arrest him. After hanging up, Director Jiang returned to his office and asked Department Head Park, Music, to find a way to snatch the case back from Department 5. This was originally a pile of accumulated garbage from the old bureau that was thrown to the new bureau a long time ago, so it's reasonable to reclaim it. On the other side, Wu Jiang also came to ask the police chief for permission to handle Chairman Chun's case. The police chief had no objection but told them to work quietly. Afterwards, Wu Jiang led people to Chairman Chun's house and was discovered by the people. They were happy and cheered, hoping the police would help them get their money back. Mr. Zhang led his men inside to search. However, after searching almost the entire house, they still found nothing. Luckily, the investigators found the bag the mistress had brought. But inside there was only a pile of used diapers. Chairman Chun secretly laughed himself, still pretending to be sick and crying because he was wrongly accused. The tax bureau staff were utterly helpless, and the people who saw it were furious. They believed that the Southern Bureau was colluding with Chairman Chun, and the people demanded to be allowed to enter and search the house themselves. Inside Wujiang, they received a call from the police chief, ordering them to disperse immediately. Since the 5th Bureau had already lost face, Wujiang had no choice but to agree. But before they could leave, Dong-do unexpectedly walked in carrying a hammer. First, he greeted Chairman Chun. Hopefully, the old man won't be able to pretend anymore. Dong-do took out Chairman Chun's payment history. A month ago, the old man had renovated his house, and Dong-do thought that Chairman Chun had hidden the money in the wall. Chairman Chun's expression immediately changed. Dong-do directly smashed the pillar, and a coin fell out. Chairman Chun no longer pretended. The third brother wanted to stop Dong-do, but it was too late. The pillar collapsed, causing all the money on the pipe to fall out in astonishment to everyone. Dong-do was confident with the face of a winner. Chairman Chun angrily rushed forward and grabbed Dong-do by the collar, his strength showing no sign of illness. Dong-do subdued him and dragged him outside. Hee-jiang noticed and hurried after them. She saw Dong-do threatening Chairman Chun, forcing him to admit that he had someone from the tax bureau backing him. But Chairman Chun refused to confess. Dong-do reminded the old man that if he didn't confess, that person wouldn't spare him. After saying that, Dong-do let go of Chairman Chun and left. Hee-rang continued to pursue her. When she passed by reporter Chok, she was accidentally recognized by him. Unexpectedly, reporter Chok was also present at the scene of Dong-do's father's crime. Outside, Hee-rang caught up with Dong-do first. She wanted to praise Dong-do, saying that without him, Chairman Chun wouldn't have been exposed. However, Hee-rang also had a few words of advice for Dong-do. Since he was working at Department 5, he should at least show some respect to Mr. Zhang. Then there are the elders who came before, and shouldn't act on impulse. Dong-do didn't care. Bureau 5 was already a garbage dump. Adding another piece of trash like Dong-do didn't matter. However, this piece of trash was a hero in the eyes of the people. They surrounded Dong-do to thank him. Thanks to him, the people were able to get justice. Dong-do walked proudly among the crowd, still having to show a little humility. The news quickly spread widely. Deputy Director Kim saw this news and felt that Dong-do was a talent that could be exploited. Supervisor Du-han told her, "We have investigated and found that the person colluding with Chairman Chun in the tax bureau is Director Jiang. The two of them frequently communicate with each other by phone." Deputy Director Kim wanted to ignore this matter, so she decided to use a small bait to catch a big fish, exposing the person behind Director Jiang. Because the real enemy Deputy Director Kim was targeting was only Tae-jun. But she only thought of it in her head and didn't tell Do-hun, because he was Tun's son. Meanwhile, Tae-jun received news that Chairman Chun's case had been exposed. He angrily reprimanded Director Jiang, saying he couldn't even manage to wipe his mouth after eating. Director Jiang knelt down to apologize, but Tae-jun didn't want to see his face. Director Jiang left resentfully, and then Tae-jun spoke with his subordinates, expressing his feelings about Dong-do. Dong-do was a double-edged sword. If not used properly, he would cut himself. Tae-jun then ordered his subordinates to monitor Dong-do, ensuring that Dong-do followed the plan he had arranged. At this time, Director Jiang was angry with Director An. He ordered Director An to stop the people from Department 5 from searching Chairman Chun's house, but Director An couldn't do it. Director An didn't expect Dong-do's presence, so he could only bow his head and listen to the scolding. After venting his anger, Director Jiang left. Outside, he was accidentally spotted by Dong-do. Director Jiang was also part of Dong-do's plan. Later, Dong-do went to the press conference, praising the department's achievements. Director An didn't want this to happen, but still had to smile in front of the reporters. Dong-do had the opportunity to show off his pride in his achievements, not forgetting to taunt Hee-rang. Hee-rang was extremely upset and ran into the room crying loudly. She should have been the one in that position. She had only been working for a few days and had already received praise and compliments from her colleagues, but Dong-do had dealt everyone a painful blow, saying that everyone here was incompetent. Dong-do took Hee-rang's resignation letter, and moreover, he threatened to quit at the slightest difficulty. Everyone was resentful, but Dong-do wasn't wrong. In fact, Dong-do wanted to use this method to motivate his colleagues to strive harder, but he angered Wu Jiang. He dragged Dong-do outside to reprimand him. Young people should learn humility. After all, everyone in the office is a colleague, and if you don't respect each other, you can't work together. Dong-do still had a haughty expression, saying that Wu Jiang's leadership wasn't good, but that he was perfectly capable of doing the job. Wu Jiang became even more angry, almost rushing to scoop up the umbrella stream. Fortunately, a colleague stopped him in time. Actually, it wasn't that Wu Jiang didn't want to work, but he was always being held back by the department head. Without giving them a chance to develop, Department 5 is not simply a dumping ground but also a place to cover up the hidden corners of the National Tax Department. The cases that other departments throw here are all pre-arranged. It's not that Department 5 doesn't want to solve them, but that they are not allowed to. Newcomers like you don't know this, inadvertently disrupting the scheme that those behind the scenes have set up. Director An assigned the task of controlling Dong-do to Wu Jiang, telling him not to let Dong-do continue causing trouble, otherwise none of them would be safe. At this time, Tae-jun was having dinner with Lawyer PQ. For some reason, Lawyer PQ obtained the documents that Deputy Director Kim had given to the reporter to provoke him last time. He told Tae-jun that the person behind Chairman Chun's arrest was Deputy Director Kim. Tae-jun still needs more time to deal with Deputy Director Kim, not just a day or two. He temporarily put this matter aside. Lawyer PQ still had to remind Jun that if the new Deputy Director Kim were to uncover the secrets of the PQ group, none of them would be finished. Tae-jun had his own calculations. At this time, Dong-do went to meet a senior colleague who used to be his father's colleague. Dong-do wanted to know about his father's investigation 15 years ago at the PQ Corporation, but as soon as PQ was mentioned, the senior left. Dong-do chased after him and took out a photo. Did the people in the photo all know about it? The senior gave Dong-do a hint. By following Wu Jiang, Dong-do would find the answer. Because Wu Jiang was also one of the people in the photo. On the other side, Hee-rang was talking to her boyfriend. Recounting recent events, she was extremely upset. Dong-do was just a newcomer. Why did he dare to look down on her? Her boyfriend encouraged Hee-rang, saying that although she was weak, she was a kind person, and she should just follow her heart. Hee-jang immediately understood, and she decided to do what she was good at, which was helping others. Afterward, Hee-jang took some money to the hospital and secretly hid it in a patient's drawer. This couple was one of the victims of Chairman Chun, whom Hee-jang had accidentally met a few days earlier. The husband had lost all his money to Chairman Chun's scam and foolishly sought death. The pregnant wife was about to follow her husband. Fortunately, Hee-jun stopped her in time, and thus she saved 3 members of a family. Returning to reality, Hee-jun discovered that there was also an envelope of money in the fruit bag. She went outside to see who had brought it, and unexpectedly it was Oh-jang. He regretted not dealing with Chairman Chun sooner, which almost caused someone to lose their mother. It seems Wu Jiang also has a conscience. Hee-rang was extremely happy because she was surrounded by good people. Afterwards, He Rang went to a restaurant for dinner and accidentally sat right behind Dong-du. He Rang asked the owner to move to another table to avoid him, but unfortunately, Dong-du recognized her. Dong-du continued to tease He Rang. He Rang drained a glass and poured out all the resentment in her heart. In the past few years, she had worked at the department and hadn't achieved a single good result. Because there was no opportunity to show off, the newcomer, who had only been here for a few days, brazenly took over the case right in front of everyone, and arrogantly scolded He Rang and everyone else. Seeing He Rang starting to cry, Dong-du intended to turn and apologize, but unexpectedly she collapsed onto the table. With such poor drinking ability, she dared to go drinking alone. Dong-du had no choice but to take He Rang back to the tax office. The next day, He Rang woke up with a bewildered expression, not knowing why she was there. She remembered the embarrassing incident from the previous night. She just wanted to dig a hole and hide. He Rang went to find Dong-du, wanting to thank him and apologize at the same time. Dong-du is also straightforward. He gave He Jiang the laundry bill, and she had to treat me to a meal. He Jiang immediately agreed. Later, the 5th Bureau received a whistleblower who requested a direct meeting with the parachute department. It turned out that last night the whistleblower received a USB drive containing clues about Director Lai's actions 5 years ago. The two were close colleagues. Initially, the accuser had no intention of exposing the truth because he felt he lacked the ability to reveal it. But after watching Dong-du on television, he saw a glimmer of hope to reopen the case. The accuser recounted that 5 years ago he and Director Lai worked in the company of the female chairman. AU Foods is a franchise chain of PQ. Initially, the company planned to open 2,000 stores in 8 years, but suddenly lawyer PQ wanted to speed up the process, leading to a significant increase in franchise fees. The female president wanted to evade taxes and use that money to cover the franchise fees, but the whistleblower and Director Lai disagreed. They decided to file a complaint with the National Tax Bureau. According to the deputy director, the case was handled by the 3rd Department. They immediately closed the case. Now the deadline for reopening the case is almost over, and moreover, new evidence is needed. The investigation cannot proceed based solely on the accuser's testimony. The disappointed whistleblower left, and Dong-du fell into deep thought. Should he just let this case go like that? After some encouragement from He Jiang, Dong-du decided to chase after the whistleblower. He had placed his trust in Dong-du. Even with a glimmer of hope, he had to see it through. The whistleblower handed Dong-du the USB drive. He had said everything he needed to say. Dong-du could find out the rest himself. The whistleblower only regretted and felt guilty towards Director Lai for being too cowardly. Afterwards, Dong-du took the USB drive home and looked at it alone. Music. He discovered that Director Lai showed signs of depression. The female chairman called him outside and threw the tax evasion complaint directly in his face. She asked Director Lai, "Who else is an accomplice? He wants to cover for you, so he's keeping quiet." The female chairman angrily poured water on Director Lai's head, humiliated him, and then left. He could completely handle these things. However, Director Lai suddenly saw something and hurriedly chased after it. The footage cuts off here. Dong-du wanted more clues, so he asked He Rang to go to the 3rd Bureau to investigate, because they were the ones who handled the case 5 years ago. At the 3rd Bureau, He Rang met a senior colleague. She asked to borrow the case files from AO Foods. The senior colleague's expression immediately changed. He politely refused and left. Afterwards, the senior officer returned to inform Chief Park. Bureau 5 was investigating food product A, and Chief Park didn't want the secret from 5 years ago to be revealed, so he planned to cause trouble for Bureau 5. Dong-du, unable to obtain documents about food product A, decided to research it himself online. The next day, having gathered quite a bit of information, he brought it to the office for everyone to review. Unexpectedly, the police chief was waiting there. He requested that the case be handed over to the female chief. If they had made a mistake in their investigation the previous year, they should atone for it themselves. As professionals in the field, they shouldn't rise through the ranks based on their colleagues' mistakes. Dong-du wanted to object, but Chiefin ignored him. Wu Jiang knew this would happen and had no opinion at all. After Chiefin left, Dong-du reproached Wu Jiang for letting the case get stolen. Wu Jiang just laughed and left. In fact, he had already prepared another plan. Dong-du didn't want to let it go easily either, so he immediately ran out to carry out a new plan. At the same time, Dong-du also called He Rang, asking her to persuade his colleagues to come to AU Food to seize the documents. Then He Rang showed everyone the reason for Director Lai's death. It turned out that when the female chairman scolded him, his son saw everything. Disappointed in his father, he ran away. Director Lai chased after him but couldn't catch him. Then Director Lai passed away for unknown reasons. Rumors circulated in loan company that he committed suicide. However, people from Department 5 didn't believe this. They went to the food company to investigate the truth of the matter. At this time, Department 3 returned with the documents they had obtained from Department 5. Someone then discovered that the box contained only blank paper. Department Head Park, angered by the prank, immediately gathered personnel and went to the food company. The other side, Department 5, arrived one step ahead of Department 3, but they were still late. AU Food received inside information and destroyed almost all the evidence. Gritting their teeth, they went to the president's office door, smelled something burning, and immediately broke down the door and rushed in. She tried to put out the fire with water, but only found a scrap of paper in the trash can. Her phone was also submerged in water. The female chairman looked at He Rang with a challenging expression, which made her extremely angry. Then He Rang went to the finance department. All the papers there had been shredded, and the documents on the computer had been completely erased. The security cameras were being replaced, and the department couldn't find any useful evidence. Disappointed, He Rang called Dong Du. His plan was half-failed, but Dong Du still had faith in turning things around. Music. Suddenly, Chief Park appeared and snatched He Rang's phone. He advised the people from Department 5 to withdraw, because this case had been handed over to Department 3 by the superiors. Chief Park, knowing Dong Du's character, threatened him over the phone. If Dong Du continued to act recklessly, Chief Park could file a complaint, causing Dong Du to be investigated. Dong Du pretended to think for a moment, then said, 2 words, "I don't care," and hung up. Department Head Park was furious that he couldn't strip Dong Du naked. He turned to vent his anger on the staff of Department 5. Unexpectedly, everyone was unafraid of Department Head Park. It turned out that He Jiang's meeting with a senior officer at Department 3 was also part of Dong Du's plan. His purpose was to spread rumors to cause panic among the internal agents in Department 3. Previously, Dong Du showed He Jiang the financial report of AU Foods that he found in the garbage dump of Department 5. This was brought by Director Lai, who had submitted it to Department 3 5 years ago to report AU Foods for tax evasion. Afterwards, the internal agents secretly returned it to the female chairman, causing Director Lai to get into trouble. There was also a stain of soda spilled on the corner of the report by the female chairman on Director Lai's head. After Director Lai's death, Department 3 began investigating AU Food. They seized a lot of documents, including financial reports. Only the reports were originals, the rest were copies. However, Department 3 didn't touch them and immediately concluded that AU Food was clean, the clearest evidence being the soft drink stain. If you look at the documents repeatedly, there's no reason they should still be there. Then, Department 3 threw all the documents into the garbage dump of Department 5. Now that the case has been reopened, Department 3 insists on getting the documents back, inadvertently creating an opportunity for the internal agents to cheat. Therefore, Department 3 received only blank papers, not that Dong Du was playing a trick on them. However, everything was still within Dong Du's calculations. To find the insider in the third department, this person must at least be a department head or higher to make a decision to quickly close the case. On the other side, Dong Du arrived at the door of the National Tax Bureau's classroom, where a seminar was taking place to select exemplary tax-paying businesses, including AU Foods, as proposed by T-Jun. Dong Du directly opened the door and stormed in. To everyone's astonishment, he boldly declared that AU Foods and its related businesses did not deserve this award, because it's a tax-evading company. The staff tried to drag Dong Du out. The director asked him to continue. Dong Du asked permission to present evidence to support his argument. The director of AU Foods was harassed by the female chairman for exposing the tax evasion company. This led to depression and self-doubt. Deputy Director Kim felt suspicious that if it was a whistleblower, their identity would have been concealed by the organization. Why was Director Lai discovered? Dong Du immediately exposed it. Someone in the tax bureau was colluding with AU Foods. Director Jiang stood up to refute it, because Bureau 3 was the unit investigating AU Foods, so saying that was tantamount to directly accusing them. He wants to turn the situation around by accusing Bureau 5 of investigating a case outside of his jurisdiction, and even daring to raid the food store and then standing here talking nonsense. Dong Du wants everyone to focus on the main point. Although Bureau 5 raided the food store unexpectedly, they didn't find any evidence. According to the informant's intelligence, the food store was operating normally this morning. The documents were neatly arranged on the shelves, but before the 5th department arrived, the company was having repairs done. All the documents were moved. It must be said that the setup was too sophisticated. This further confirmed that there was an internal report about AU Food, and the two sides argued for a while. Jun felt bored and wanted to end the meeting to leave this matter to the supervisory board for investigation. Deputy Director Kim suggested investigating both Department 3 and Department 5 for fairness, because Department 5 had indeed failed in its duties. But if Dong-do caused it himself, he must bear all the punishment. Dong-do didn't want to die alone, so he decided to drag Director An into the swamp. I followed his instructions. Everyone waited for Director An's confirmation. Unexpectedly, he actually stood up and took full responsibility. In fact, Dong-do knew early on that Director An was being oppressed by Director Jiang. He had always patiently waited for an opportunity to retaliate. Before today's meeting, Dong-do sent Director An a message with a picture, saying that he was being betrayed by Director Jiang. Dong-do used a tactic of provocation to call on Director An to side with him. Luckily, he chose the right moment. Director Jiang angrily grabbed Director An. "How dare you betray me?" All eyes were on the two of them. Director Jiang realized he had been a little too impulsive, so he quickly let go. "Sorry, the two directors will accept the investigation according to the proper procedure." At that time, Dong-do wanted to ask for another matter to involve Bureau 5 in the AU food case. If they hadn't discovered the truth, the case would have been perfectly covered up by Bureau 3. The chief agreed to Dong-do's request, but he had one condition: Wu Jiang had to lead everyone. Dong-do happily agreed. He also wanted to test Wu Jiang's abilities. Dong-do hurriedly pulled Wu Jiang away. They had to quickly find evidence before the statute of limitations for prosecution expired. According to Dong-do's suspicion, Director Jiang was the mole. His attitude today made that clear. Wu Jiang told Dong-do that without direct evidence, all arguments would be meaningless. Dong-do wanted to go to the places Director Jiang frequently visited to find the documents he had hidden. Suddenly, Du-hun appeared. Du-hun overheard Dong-do and Wu Jiang's conversation. He wanted to advise Dong-do not to do something pointless. Du-hun had been monitoring Director Jiang for a long time, but he hadn't contacted or received any money related to AU food. Dong-do thought Du-hun had overlooked some detail, but if even the supervisory board was fooled, Du-hun didn't believe Dong-do could expose Director Jiang. At that moment, Wu Jiang confidently declared that the game had only just begun. He explained that after Dong-do's actions caused the employees of the Third Bureau to be investigated, the investigation, which started as a tax evasion investigation, had now turned into an internal corruption investigation. Those with a guilty conscience will be startled. Let the prey drift away on its own and set a trap. A little purging of the system is also good. On the other side, employees of Department 3 and Department 5 are bickering, fighting over the AU food document archive. To find the original lost document, Department Head Park unexpectedly received a call. He immediately ordered his subordinates to return to take over the investigation. Department 5 secured the document archive, and he rang and his colleagues went inside to search. However, there was no result. All the documents from the past 5 years had disappeared. The deputy director, who was in the security room, also didn't see anyone taking the documents away. Suddenly, Jiang thought of a possibility. The documents were thrown out the window and then collected by someone downstairs. She immediately asked the deputy director to check the security cameras in front of the company, and discovered that Department Head Park's car appeared around a suspicious time. The underground parking garage camera also captured the scene. Chief Park was loading a large box onto a car. Could it be documents inside? Jiang immediately informed Dong-do that Chief Park was the one who had obtained the original documents. At the same time, Du-hun also received a call from Chief Park. Knowing he was under suspicion, he asked Du-hun for help. Chief Park was on his way to the supervisory department. He will explain everything to Du-hun. Dong-do also wanted to participate, but Hun disagreed because he thought the 5th Bureau was not capable enough. Let's leave this to the supervisory board. Wu Jiang challenged them to see who could find the documents first. Wu Jiang turned and left. Dong-do hurried after him. Du-hun could only smile. Actually, before that, Du-hun received a phone call from Jun with extremely tense instructions. He had to find the documents before Dong-do and hide them until the statute of limitations for prosecution expired. Jun used Dong-do as a trigger to ignite Du-hun's competitive spirit. Because in the past, when they were friends, Du-hun always lost to Dong-do in every aspect. This time he's not allowed to lose again. Meanwhile, Tun is on his way back. His subordinates wonder if it's okay to let Dong-do cause such trouble. Jun isn't worried about Dong-do. In fact, he wants to give Dong-do a chance to prove himself. However, the director suddenly involving Wu Jiang is unexpected for Tun. He doesn't know what the director is planning. Deputy Director Kim also asked the director a similar question. Why did you play this card so early? The director had his own calculations. He wanted Wu Jiang to have a chance to train beforehand, preparing for the next move. Deputy Director Kim was only afraid that Wu Jiang would be crushed by 10 like last time. The director believed that Wu Jiang would succeed this time. At this time, Wu Jiang and Dong Du returned to the 5th Bureau. The people in the supervisory department had confiscated all the documents there. Dong Du angrily asked Wu Jiang, "How can we continue the investigation like this?" Wu Jiang still maintained an indifferent attitude, making Dong Du extremely frustrated. Just then, the team members returned to the office and handed the remaining evidence to Wu Jiang. He requested that it be taken to the forensic department to see if anything could be recovered. Because the food company destroyed these things, it proves that it must be very important. Dong Du thought Wu Jiang had abandoned the case, so he reminded Dong Du, "We are looking for the records of Food Company A. The documents the supervisory board took away just now were useless." A colleague wondered. The suspect who took the ledgers was Department Head Park, who had already confessed to the supervisory board. They would surely be outmaneuvered. Jiang smiled again. Department Head Park was merely a pawn, even helping the bureau by time. Everyone didn't need to worry about Department Head Park. Turning to another direction for investigation, Dong Du sat down and expressed his thoughts. He still had doubts about Director Jiang. Jiang wondered, if so, where would he hide the ledgers? Perhaps his house or properties registered in his name. Mr. Jiang had prepared a list, and he ordered everyone to split up and search these places. Everyone immediately set off. On the other side, Chief Park was explaining to Du-han. That day, Director Jiang had a meeting at the tax bureau, so he asked Chief Park to go to the food stall to pick up some boxes of goods, saying they were boxes of toys. Department Head Park had also gone to fight go with Director Jiang and the female president of AU Foods, so there was no doubt. Department Head Park didn't even open it to see how Han could easily trust Department Head Park. He told Do-han to check the black box in the car to find out. After checking the black box, Do-han was confused. Indeed, Department Head Park's journey was nothing unusual. Do-han wondered with his colleague how far the interrogation of Director Jiang had progressed. He admitted to knowing the female chairman of Food Company A in a casual way, occasionally going out to eat and playing golf together, but denied receiving any bribes. After that, Director Jiang remained silent. Without revealing anything further, Du-han decided to go to Director Jiang's interrogation room. But seeing his irritable attitude, Du-han didn't dare ask any more questions. He let Director Jiang go outside to relax. After going outside, Director Jiang suddenly heard the phone ringing coming from his jacket pocket. Phones are confiscated during the supervisory board's investigation. This was the phone that Du-han had secretly slipped in. In order to use it to negotiate with Director Jiang, he gave Director Jiang the opportunity to reveal the location of the ledger. In return, he would not expose Director Jiang's corruption. Du-han knew very well that Director Jiang had embezzled a lot, and he looked bewildered. "Which ledger were you referring to?" Du-han advised Director Jiang not to pretend. It was the boxes of goods that Department Head Park brought back from AU Foods. Director Jiang knew that no matter how he explained, Down wouldn't believe him, so he led him to where the boxes of goods were. Unexpectedly, he still kept the printed books in his office and hadn't moved them anywhere. Down proudly informed Tun that he had found the books. However, when he opened them, the boxes actually contained wooden toys. Down was extremely shocked. Only then could Director Jiang explain clearly. The female chairman lost a bet on own gold, so she gave him the gold toys. At this point, only a few hours remained until the deadline for prosecution. The staff of the 5th Bureau were running around everywhere, still unable to find the records, because they were going in the wrong direction. In the office, Wu Jiang also realized this, and he began to reconsider where he had gone wrong. Wu Jiang suddenly remembered a detail and hurriedly ran to check the case report again. The report did not record the name of the accuser, but instead gave them the nickname A. However, after reviewing the report, Director inadvertently revealed the name of the whistleblower in front of his subordinates. Perhaps he encountered the whistleblower when the whistleblower left the department last year. The reason Director recognized the whistleblower was simple. He was an insider at AU Foods. Then the head of the security department informed the female chairperson so that she could hide the original ledgers, while he took the opportunity to make copies of the ledgers. Before Department 5 handed it over to Department 3, the head of the security department also instigated the female chairperson to send several boxes of goods to Director Jiang, making him a suspect to buy time. Everything the head of the security department planned was too perfect. It's just a pity that it couldn't fool Wu Jiang. Later, Wu Jiang went to Director N's house and waited for him to return. Wu Jiang got straight to the point. Had he hidden the accounting records? Director and denied it. Wu Jiang took out his phone and said that the forensic team had recovered AU Foods' phone records, including some frequently contacted numbers. Wu Jiang would immediately call those numbers. The landline phone in Director An's house rang. He was startled, but it turned out that Wu Jiang was using his own phone to call. The AU Food phone couldn't be recovered. Director An had to admit his mistake. He handed over all the books to Wu Jiang, who called his subordinates to seize the books and send a report to the National Tax Bureau. Just as the statute of limitations for prosecution ended, everyone could breathe a sigh of relief. Then Dong Du and He Rang went to the food company. They still wanted to find the original ledgers, so they decided to investigate. By chance, He Rang discovered that the food company's truck had a logo similar to the one on the piece of paper. He Rang suspected that the food company had asked the shipping company to take the ledgers away. With a few simple investigative steps, the Bureau got the results as predicted. After the books were brought back to the E-Music company for shipping, AO Food requested them to divide them into portions and send them to different shipping units. Then these units brought the books back to AO Food, which was very bulky, but it still didn't escape the watchful eyes of the Tax Bureau staff. The next day, Dong Du waited for the female president at AO Food. Carrying the tax payment request, the team also found the original AU Food records. The female president had to both pay taxes and undergo an investigation. Her career ended here. The female president was extremely angry. Dong Du ignored her leaving. Meanwhile, Wu Jiang went to meet the accuser and handed him a USB drive containing the true story of Director Lai's death. It turned out that 5 years ago, while chasing after his son, Director Lai suddenly had a seizure. At that moment, a colleague came and asked Director Lai to drive the female chairman to the airport. She had a business meeting with a foreign partner. On the way, Director Lai couldn't bear it anymore and collapsed in the car. The female president didn't call an ambulance but called a taxi to continue going out. Director Lai was slumped over, kicking a chicken leg, causing the car to have an accident, and people started spreading rumors that he had committed suicide. Back to reality, the accuser brought the video back to the company and showed it to everyone. He also uploaded the video to the internet. The female president angrily scolded the accuser. He advised the president to stop, and everyone criticized her together. The president angrily left. At this time, Dong Du and He Rang went to Director Lai's house to bring compensation money to his wife and children. The son didn't want to accept it. He still blamed his father, saying that if he hadn't come forward to accuse them, he would still be alive now. Dong Du understood his feelings because he was in the same situation. But Dong Du knew one thing: if people kept giving in to evil, evil would run rampant. Anyone could be a victim of evil. But how many people are brave enough to fight against it? Although he was so stubborn, his son loved Director Lai very much. He didn't show it in front of others, only hiding in a corner and crying alone. At midnight, Dong Du crept to the police station. When everyone had left, even though the police station was a garbage dump, the police chief had been hiding there for all these years. He was definitely still hiding some secret. After a fruitless search, Dong Du accidentally discovered that the air conditioner remote control had lost its battery, and he immediately realized there was something inside the air conditioner. Dong Du obtained a document titled Tax Bureau Corruption List. This will certainly cause a major uproar. On the other hand, Mr. Zhang was sitting absent-mindedly in a restaurant, thinking about some past events, when suddenly a reporter appeared. He was running around gathering information about Dong Du. The reporter wanted to exchange information with Mr. Zhang. He recounted some findings about Dong Du, the son of a prosecutor who single-handedly fought against the PQ Corporation, but unfortunately died in an accident 4 years ago. Back then, Dong Du's father was quite famous. Mr. Zhang still remembers him. However, it is worth noting that Dong Du's father and T. Jun were very close. Dong Du becoming a prosecutor and working at the 5th Bureau was all arranged by Tun. O Zhang and Sun had a feud, and upon hearing this, he immediately put Dong Du on the blacklist. At this time, Tun went to the National Tax Bureau, feeling unwell. Regarding the head of the security department secretly hiding the accounting records, Sun reprimanded his subordinates, asking how they could let this happen. The subordinates could only apologize, saying that if this news hadn't leaked out, the National Tax Bureau would still have maintained its reputation. But Sun had a different idea: to let the head of the security department bear the blame alone, as internal self-incrimination would tarnish the reputation. However, this would demonstrate that the National Tax Bureau is fair to everyone. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, Sun was able to eliminate the treacherous police chief, while his subordinates worried they would one day end up like him. Stepping out of the elevator, his eyes changed, filled with calculation and scheming. Meanwhile, Sun took Hun into his office to tell his son about his upcoming plan so he could take the position of police chief. Hun advised his father to stop. With the current situation, Tae-jun only needs to avoid doing anything to Shi-dae to easily obtain the position of director. But what about the bad things he did in the past? To get to where he is today, Tae-jun has had to step over the corpses of so many enemies, even colleagues. He taught Do-hun a lesson. Those who are not skilled and not ruthless will never succeed. Do you know why you always lose to Dong-do? Because you're not as good and decisive as him. Do-hun was extremely resentful. Tae-jun gave his son one last chance. This time, he had to defeat Dong-do suddenly. Tae-jun received a phone call. Someone outside wanted to see him. Tae-jun went out to check and found it was Chifen. He begged Tae-jun for help, but Tae-jun refused. Chifen then resorted to threats. He had the tax bureau's corruption list, which included Sun's name. Sun remained calm. He knew that once the list was made public, director and would be blacklisted and unable to find work anywhere. Remember, he had a family, a wife, and children, so he should consider the consequences of this. Director and was utterly helpless. Sun ignored him and left. On another note, Wu Jiang went to the funeral home to pay his respects to an entire family. Wu Jiang painfully recalled that when he arrived at this family's home, they had all perished in smoke, with only the youngest daughter showing signs of life. Wu Jiang quickly carried the little girl to the hospital for emergency treatment. Returning to reality, Wu Jiang discovered a fresh bouquet of flowers at the burial plot. Wu Jiang hurriedly ran outside to search, thinking that the bouquet of flowers was left by the youngest daughter of that family, but he couldn't find anyone. Wu Jiang was extremely disappointed. That evening, Dong-do had an appointment with Director Nuo. He wanted Director Nuo to write a transfer request to Department 5. Because Director Nuo was sure to be dismissed soon, Dong-do wants to gather the people he trusts in the 5th Bureau to overturn the garbage dump here, to find the dark secrets that the National Tax Bureau is hiding. The bureau chief doesn't want trouble. She's very afraid of Tae-jun. Unexpectedly, Dong-do says that Tae-jun is the target he wants to overthrow. Only then can Dong-do confidently fight a battle with a PQ group, Wei Tse-yun. Because 4 years ago, Dong-do discovered a shocking secret. At Dong-do's father's funeral, Rang told him that she accidentally overheard a conversation between Dong-do's father and department head Park. His corruption case was just a pretext for those who took bribes from PQ to find the Black Book. It was the book Dong-do received, but only the cover remained. After that, Dong-do began investigating his father's accident. He obtained a list of cars entering and leaving the road. At the time of the accident, Dong-juop, looking at the black cars, accidentally discovered another car that was not on the police investigation list. It also did not appear in the traffic cameras. The road had 2 cameras, one on the east and one on the west. The one on the west was broken. The driver knew this, so he drove in from the west and then turned around in the middle of the road. Why would the driver do that? Someone involved in shady activities surely has a secret. Dong-do took the license plate number and asked a friend to search for the car with license plate 48P0818. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be Tun's car. Dong-do knew that Tun was the one who harmed his father, but to fulfill his father's ideals, Dong-do decided to remain silent for 4 years. Back to reality, Dong-do is carrying out his plan step by step, gradually eliminating the trusted associates of Taesun. The first is director and tells Dong-do that things are not simple, but Dong-do has already embarked on this path and will definitely not turn back. Does he want revenge for his father? Initially, yes. His father always loved Dong-ayu. Although he was involved in a corruption case orchestrated by PQ, he still remembered his son's birthday. Conversely, Dong-do always blamed his father for not giving them the chance to share one last dinner together. However, later, Dong-do understood his father's ideals. Even if it means fighting against a force like PQ alone, the truth must be brought to light so that people do not suffer injustice. The father could not complete the task, so Dong-do will follow in his footsteps. On the other hand, Tae-jun went to the restaurant to meet lawyer PQ. However, he stood Jun up. Lawyer PQ went to meet another group of high-ranking leaders, including Deputy Director Kim. Then someone called Tun to inform him that someone had leaked information to the press. It was about someone in the tax bureau accepting bribes and helping AU Foods evade taxes. Tun was extremely worried, feeling betrayed. The next day, Tun saw the news that the female president of AU Foods had been arrested. She also admitted that someone in the tax bureau helped her, along with photos of lawyer PQ associating with other leaders. Tae-jun believed there was a conspiracy. He couldn't sit still, so he called Do-hun and asked him to follow the plan. Then Do-hun went to see Deputy Director Kim and gave her the conclusion of the case. with only director and bearing the blame for corruption. Director Jiang is not involved at all. Deputy, music. Director Kim knows this is Tun's instruction. She reminded Do-hun not to get bogged down like his father. Do-hun is also in a difficult position now. On one side is his biological father, on the other is his responsibility. He still doesn't know which side to choose. At this time, Director Jiang has been released and is celebrating with his colleagues. Seeing this, Wu Jiang was unwilling, but he couldn't do anything. By chance, Wu Jiang passed by the Chang'an Bureau, and the bureau chief's face was full of regret, which reminded Wu Jiang of what happened a few years ago when they were in the same team, including Bureau Chief Jiang, and Wu Jiang was the superior of those two. At that time, Director An came forward to accuse Wu Jiang of accepting bribes and using violence during tax inspections, causing the death of an entire family. Wu Jiang angrily confronted Director An. Having heard this information from somewhere, Director An unexpectedly said that everyone in the team had accused Wu Jiang. Only then did Wu Jiang realize that he had been tricked into becoming a scapegoat. Director An knelt down and apologized to Wu Jiang. Circumstances forced him to do so. The others didn't even dare look Wu Jiang in the eye. Suddenly, Ti Yun appeared. Finally, Wu Jiang knew who was behind everything. He was almost in despair, knowing he couldn't change the outcome. Wu Jiang, having finally gotten rid of his remaining resentment, collapsed and accepted reality. However, Wu Jiang still had one thing to beg Tun to do: spare the youngest daughter of that family. Jun flatly refused, leaving Wu Jiang seething with anger. Returning to reality, Wu Jiang wondered what circumstances had forced him this time. Director An was trying to evade responsibility. Mr. Zhang held him back and lectured him. In this country, even garbage collectors have to pay 50 centimeters in tax for each bottle. Yet there are some wretched people who don't know enough, even when they've already taken billions of dong. What is the purpose of having a tax office? Mr. Zhang angrily grabbed Director An and said, "Tell me." Suddenly, Ti Jun appeared and reminded Wu Jiang that this was not the place to cause trouble. Only then did he let go. The resentment in Wu Jiang's heart was rekindled, and then Ti Jun went to the director's office. He admitted his own fault for not strictly managing his subordinates. The director is responsible. This can't be blamed solely on Ti Jun, but on the problematic tax bureau system. They've overlooked too many loopholes. Deputy Director Kim suggested, music, establishing a National Tax Bureau Investigation Committee once and for all. She'll put an end to the festering sores in the system. She requested to start with Department 3. Taejun knew Deputy Director Kim wanted to get rid of her henchmen. Why Department 3? Deputy Director Kim presented the evidence. Director Jiang had called Chairman Chun during the pharmaceutical company case. Facing Director Taejun's skeptical gaze, he dared not question further. News of the investigation committee's formation quickly spread throughout the organization. Everyone was afraid of being implicated, so no one dared to get involved with Director Jiang. Seeing everyone shunning him, Director Jiang was extremely bewildered and hurriedly went to find out the reason. At this time, Du-hun led the supervisory team to Bureau 5. To seize documents in the office of the Bureau 5 director, the main purpose was still to find the list of corrupt officials. But they couldn't see it behind the air conditioner, because Dong-du was one step ahead. Du-hun asked the Bureau 5 staff if anyone had ever been in this room, but they all shook their heads. Disappointed, Du-hun led the supervisory team back. Outside, he happened to run into Dong-du. Du-hun suspected Dong-du was the one who took the list, so he followed him to greet him. Dong-du pretended not to know, acting extremely annoyed, which made Du-hun furious. Suddenly, someone lunged at Dong-du. Luckily, he dodged. Everyone was confused, not understanding what was happening. Raya MEP continued to grab Dong-du and throw him to the ground, twisting his ribs. It turned out it was all just a misunderstanding. Rhea MEP came here to take revenge on the police chief. A year ago he reported the Loan Shark gang, but it has not been resolved yet, causing many more victims. However, after reviewing the He Jiang gang's financial report, nothing unusual was found. They still pay taxes in full. The interest rate is also in accordance with regulations. That's just the tip of the iceberg. 2 years ago, JMP started working in the gang and didn't see any problems, but after a year, he discovered the dark side of the gang. A student borrowed money for his mother's medical treatment but couldn't pay it back, so he was assaulted and pushed off the second floor. Rhea MEP was also terrified at that time. He quickly reported it to the police and quit his job. However, when the police came to the hospital to take his statement, the student said he tripped and fell. Rhea MP promised to be a witness, but he still didn't change his mind. The officers at Department 5 suspected that the student might have been bribed, or that a gang had promised to forgive his debt. That's also why Map contacted Department 5. He wanted to find out if the gang was using the money for any illegal purposes. Hearing this, Heejin suddenly remembered an old case. She wanted to know the name of the gang's company. Now it was called Manyat. Only those in the gang knew its old name, Goldcat Credit. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be the Goldcat credit case that the department had handled. This was also the case that left the most lingering regret in everyone's hearts. A mother borrowed money to treat her daughter's terminal illness but couldn't afford to pay. Because Goldcat Credit was seizing the money, the mother left a suicide note and killed herself next to her deceased daughter. By the time he rang arrived, it was too late. Later, this case was stolen by Department 4. This morning they returned the documents to Department 5. We thought Department 4 had solved the case many years ago, but unexpectedly, this is also a long-standing case. Everyone started to feel there was something wrong with this. After the colleagues went out to investigate, He Jiang and Dong-du stayed in the office. He Rang wondered what Dong-du's real purpose was in coming to the 5th Bureau. Dong-du didn't want to answer. He considered himself an eccentric and had even helped businesses evade taxes. Dong-du advised He Rang and everyone to stay away. But here we are teammates, and besides, he has reformed. Dong-du asked He Rang in return, "If we are teammates, do you promise to trust me, no matter what happens?" He Jiang thought Dong-du was joking, so he agreed with him. The remark unintentionally warmed Dong-du's heart. On the other side, Director Jiang came to see Tun to beg him to save him. Director Jiang handed over the list of corruption cases that Dong-du had given him. It turned out that Du had gone to see Director Jiang, hoping he would betray Tun and become his support. In return, he received these documents, but Director Jiang swore to Tsun that he was loyal only to him. Tsun looked through the documents and suddenly broke into a big smile. Because the plan had succeeded, Tsun realized that Director Jiang's true face was that of a traitor. Previously, Dong-du met Tun, gave him a copy of the corruption list, and then drew Tun into a plan. To prove his worth, he drew Tun, confirming Director Jiang's loyalty. When he was cornered, Dong-du would give the original corruption list to Director Jiang. If he brought the complete list to Tun, it could prove his loyalty. But Director Jiang had other ambitions. He secretly hid part of the original corruption list before bringing it to Taejun's office. Back to reality, Tun demanded that Director Jiang return the hidden part of the list, promising to let him leave the tax bureau without a hitch. Otherwise, the consequences were inevitable. After saying this, Taejun left, a radiant smile on his face. He had acquired a valuable asset like Dong-du and eliminated a traitor. Only then did Director Jiang realize he had been tricked badly by Dong-du. He could only harbor resentment. The next day, the National Tax Bureau held a meeting to find a replacement for the vacant position of Director of Bureau 5. Everyone was free to nominate and run for office. After a moment of silence, the director decided to announce his nomination. Unexpectedly, it was Wu Jiang. The entire hall was shaken. The most surprised person was undoubtedly Taejun. Wu Jiang's purpose in returning this time was certainly to take revenge on him. For years, Wu Jiang had lived superficially amidst the increasingly rotten state of the National Tax Bureau, because he couldn't move past the haunting memories of the past. But when Dong-du appeared, Wu Jiang realized that turning a blind eye wasn't the solution. He decided to stand up and fight for justice once more. Finally, Wu Jiang got his chance. As soon as Director An was arrested, Wu Jiang went to the director and asked him to replace Director An. Because without a high position, a person's voice becomes useless. The director agreed to give Wu Jiang a chance, returning to reality and considering his talent and qualities. Wu Jiang was qualified to become the director of Department 5, and many people supported him. However, some people still brought up past mistakes, such as the case of M. Dung's electronics company, to prevent Wu Jiang from being elected. Suddenly, someone opened the door and walked in. He was a supervisory inspector from the supervisory board, and also a friend of Wu Jiang. The supervisory inspector said that the case was just an accident, not Wu Jiang's fault. Furthermore, Wu Jiang also took full responsibility and protected his colleagues. A person with such a self-sacrificing heart is completely worthy of leading the 5th Department. At this point, many people began to change their opinions. To gain the director's favor, Taejun also supported Wu Jiang. However, some people were still worried that Wu Jiang would repeat the mistakes of the previous director of the 5th Department. The director decided to vouch for Wu Jiang. If any problems arise after 3 months, he will take responsibility and resign. But if not, the director will have the right to reassign all personnel of the National Tax Bureau without a vote by the leadership. Everyone started to feel apprehensive. and the pressure on Mr. Zhang's shoulders also increased. Tun was overjoyed, for this was a good opportunity to bring down the director. Since the director had said so, no one dared to offer any further opinions. He announced that they would proceed to the election of a new director for the 3rd term. Finally, the meeting ended. The new director for the 5th term was Oh Zhang, and the new director for the 3rd term was Director NU. The director congratulated both of them and left. The deputy director of the paralyzing department lost 2 of his most capable assistants and was replaced by 2 new people. Although extremely uncomfortable, he still had to force a smile and offer congratulations, while some people showed their displeasure openly, because they were worried that Director Jiang would expose their secrets, just like how he had exposed Director An. At this time, Dongdu and He Zhang were investigating the Gold Cat credit. They didn't understand why the debtor was beaten mercilessly but still covered for the gain. Perhaps it was a financial obligation. But the debtor only borrowed a few $100,000, not enough to force him to sell his mother like that. According to Dongdu's speculation, it's very possible the debtor was lured by the gang into borrowing another sum to pay off the old loan. Then the debtor was unable to repay this new loan and was physically exploited by the gang. There's another strange thing. Department 5 took a year to solve the case and had to hand it over to Department 4. Department 4, however, only took 15 days to close the case easily. Instead of saying they were competent, Department 4 was largely involved with Gold Cat credit. Heng decided to go to Department 4 to investigate. Dongdu and colleagues waited outside to support her. Inside, He Zhang asked the head of Department 4 about Gold Cat credit, but he didn't want to answer. The head of Department 4 looked down on Department 5, which angered He Zhang and caused a disturbance. She had to know how Department 4 had investigated Gold Cat credit. Looking at the attitude of the head of Department 4, one can guess that Department 4 and Gold Credit are related. Dongdu and his colleagues carried He Rang out. The act was over. As soon as they left, the head of Department 4 called the head of Department 4 to report the news. Bureau 5 was investigating Gold Cat credit, and the face of the head of Bureau 4 turned pale. Because now there was no one in Bureau 5 they could rely on, and moreover, they were all enemies. At this time, Wu Jiang returned to his office to prepare for his appointment. He opened the drawer and took out the newspaper article about the M electronic case. This haunting image had followed Wu Jiang for 17 years. When he arrived at the house, the whole family had perished in the smoke. Fortunately, Wu Jiang discovered that their youngest daughter was still alive. He quickly carried her to the hospital, returning to reality. Wu Jiang was ready to escape the past. To begin a new battle, he went out to blow out candles with his subordinates to celebrate his promotion to department head. At that time, Mr. Jiang realized that Dongdu was not in the office. He Jin said that Dongdu had gone out to investigate Gold Cat credit. She handed the case report to Mr. Jiang, who had just taken office and immediately had work to do. Unexpectedly, Duhan led the supervisory board to the office. Mr. Jiang sent people to block the door for him. Didn't you all take all the documents away last time? This time, Duhan wants to investigate Dongdu. He showed Wu Jiang the video recording. Dongdu broke into Director An's office. Wu Jiang wanted to know who provided the video, but Duhan couldn't reveal it. Wu Jiang was extremely angry that Dongdu dared to do something shady behind his back. Afterwards, Wu Jiang waited for Dongdu to return to ask him what he took from Director An's office. Dongdu refused to tell the truth. Wu Jiang threatened to fire him from Bureau 5. Dongdu said that Wu Jiang would regret it. He coldly turned away, leaving Dongdu somewhat disappointed. He followed the two into the interrogation room, and it turned out that the person who provided the tape was Chief Park, who, along with the head of Bureau 4, came to watch the show for fun. Duhan wanted to know what the stack of documents Dongdu brought back from Chief An's office were. Dongdu calmly replied that they were case investigation documents. After reviewing them, Dongdu returned them. No one believed Dongdu. Chief Park insisted that Dongdu had taken something. Then Dongdu pulled out a stack of documents and admitted to stealing them. When he was working at his old company, he helped some people create fake accounts to evade taxes. Director An investigated Dongdu and obtained a list of people who created the accounts. Because it was a past event, Dongdu wanted to hide it. Duhan was not surprised by Dongdu's actions, but Department Head Park and Director of Department 4 didn't believe him. Dongdu let Director of Department 4 open it to take a look. Unexpectedly, inside was the name of the police officer who handled Dongdu's father's accident. The head of Department 4 had come to him to ask for help in covering up the case. Suspecting that Dongdu knew something, the head of Department 4 immediately changed his attitude. He asked Chief Park to apologize to Dongdu for falsely accusing him. Then the head of Department 4 hurriedly pulled Chief Park away. Du-hun and Oh Jiang were bewildered, not understanding what was happening. After Du-hun left the room, Oh Jiang angrily questioned Dong-du, asking what trick he had just pulled. Dong-du countered Oh Jiang, "Have you ever beaten those people? If we don't know a few tricks, we won't be able to compete with them. That's why Dong-du is here." Oh Jiang had courage and integrity, but lacked cunning. Dong-du would compensate for that shortcoming. If Wu Jiang trusts him, the two of them can completely expose all the dark secrets of the National Tax Bureau. Wu Jiang decided to give Dong-du a chance. If he can find the person behind Goldcat Credit, the two of them will start cooperating. Otherwise, Dong-du must resign and leave. Dong-du is confident he can do it. In the evening, the girl, covered in blood, escaped from her apartment and was immediately chased by a gang of thugs. The girl begged the residents for help. Some kind people tried to call the police, but the thugs threw their phones at the residents, threatening them not to meddle in other people's affairs, and no one dared to say anything more. They dragged the girl back into the room, where screams echoed. The next day, the girl ran away again. The thugs were reprimanded by the credit manager. They couldn't even keep an eye on one girl, so the thugs just stood there and took the beating. Suddenly, the credit manager received a text message. "The police are coming here." He immediately ran away to let the thugs settle things with the police themselves. One of them claimed to be the girl's boyfriend from last night, and that he attacked her because she was with someone else. They cursed at the residents for meddling in other people's affairs, but the police didn't care. They took statements to complete the procedure and then left. Coincidentally, Department 5 was also here. Department 5 was investigating a victim of Goldcat Credit. After hearing the story, everyone noticed something unusual. Then, the police department decided to go to the police station to request records of bullying cases in the area. According to the young police officer, such cases happen frequently. Thugs use the guise of family members and many excuses to attack victims, but because the victims don't report it, the police have difficulty solving the problem. The young policeman was as open and friendly as the fake policeman was grumpy. Knowing that some of them were tax office employees, he chased them out. Luckily, the department still managed to get back the warranty case files. Meanwhile, Dong-du and Rang went to see another victim. They wanted the mechanic to give a statement. Regarding the music, things Goldcat Credit had done to him, the mechanic refused to cooperate, asking the two of them to go somewhere else so he could work. Unexpectedly, the mechanic's mother arrived. Dong-du realized that the mechanic was probably afraid of implicating his mother. However, upon learning that Dong-du and Jiang had come to investigate, the mother secretly took their business cards and called to arrange a meeting. At the cafe, the mother recounted her family's circumstances. Because his mother was ill and unable to work, the son had to pay for his education and also earn money to support himself and his mother. When he was at his wit's end, a friend introduced him to Goldcard Credit. He repaid the initial loan in full. Goldcard Credit then generously lent him a larger amount, and so the amount borrowed skyrocketed. Unable to pay, the son was chased and beaten by thugs until he had to be hospitalized. The mother intended to call the police but was stopped by her son. He said he had been in an accident. To alleviate the mother's worries, Dong-du and Rang were extremely sympathetic to the family situation. However, after receiving the message, Dong-du immediately changed his attitude. Because the mother was lying, unknowingly the victim colluded with the thugs to defraud the insurance company and use the money to pay off a loan. No matter how badly the thugs beat her, the victim had to say she had an accident in order for the insurance company to pay. The mother begged Dong-du not to report to the police, otherwise the thugs would kill them. But Dong-du ignored him and left. Rang chased after Dong-du, advising him not to make a big deal out of it for now. Dong-du couldn't accept someone harming themselves to earn money, and even less could he accept the family knowing about it and still letting the victim do it. Rang believed they had their own suffering, and had to resort to such methods out of desperation. Dong-du still thought there were better ways. The two disagreed and went their separate ways. Then Dong-du went directly to the Goldcat Credit Office and introduced himself as a member of the National Tax Bureau. The thugs were still not afraid, thinking that Dong-du had come to extort money like everyone else. However, Dong-du sat down and took out his business card. He wanted to borrow money from Goldcat Credit. The thugs were bewildered. Wouldn't it be enough to just ask them for a small bribe? Dong-du said, "I need a lot of money." The thugs had no choice but to lend it to him. On the other side, the TV was showing a scene. A man was stripping naked in a nightclub. Unexpectedly, this was the brother of lawyer PQ, being turned into a plaything by the tycoons. The leader of the tycoons is the son of Chairman BQ, who is also the current vice chairman. He is putting on a show of crying, preparing for his father's funeral. Although the chairman is still alive and well, and holds many secrets of the corporation in his hands, lawyer PQ is still patient. Because this is not yet the right time to retaliate. These pleasure-seeking tycoons are not a threat. Lawyer PQ is planning with the credit director to use Gold Card Credit's money to acquire shares of the PQ group. Waiting for the day to take over the group, the credit director is a big talker. Almost revealing the plan to the tycoons, Lawyer PQ reminded the credit director that he must protect Gold Card Credit. By the time Lawyer PQ completed the final step, that evening Hayoung went to the restaurant. She had an appointment with her boyfriend's family, but her boyfriend didn't show up. Her boyfriend's parents wanted Hayoung to sit down and talk. They disapproved of their relationship. Because they saw Hayoung as a suitable match, and she only had a mother, she had no father. They wanted Hayoung to quietly leave their son. Hayoung understood and accepted their request, although she felt a little sad. On the way home, Hayoung broke down and cried in the rain, because she felt life was so unfair. What if she didn't have a father? Hee-rang still had a mother who always loved her. Even though she was only an adopted child, Hee-rang was determined to get up and move on, crying and then going to fill her stomach. Unexpectedly, Hee-rang received a call from Dong-do, asking her to come to the hospital quickly. It turns out Dong-do found the girl who was being harassed by the thugs. She was given temporary shelter in a room by a kind staff member. Although Dong-do hated people who harmed themselves for money, he couldn't ignore the poor girl. She was too young to understand the good and bad in the world. Dong-do assigned the task to Hee-rang. He had rented an apartment and needed someone to take care of the girl. No one was more suitable than Hee-rang. After arranging her accommodation, Hee-rang went out to buy food. Dong-do called to remind her to be careful. Hee-jang wondered if Dong-do had anything else to say to her. Dong-do also knew that Hee-jang had just broken up, and he had some words of encouragement for her, saying that what she lost didn't mean she was unworthy, and sometimes losing something could lead her to something better. Just like when a person is at their loneliest and most desperate, there will always be someone ready to reach out to them. That person is Dong-do Hee-rang. She pulled Dong-do out of the abyss when he lost his only remaining family member. Now Dong-do does the same for Hee-rang, comforting her as she has to part ways with the man she loved wholeheartedly. Hee-rang remembers another person who embraced her when she lost her entire family, her current foster mother, and Hee-rang is the daughter of the family, who suffered greatly in the Mdung electronic case. 17 years ago, on the evening of the 17th, Hee-rang asked her older sister to find a way for her to watch TV at midnight. Today, there was a program Hee-rang liked, so her sister immediately gave Hee-rang a plan. After each meal, Hee-rang's family would take vitamins. But today, her parents replaced them with sleeping pills with the intention of sending the whole family to heaven together. Music. Her older sister Hee-rang's eyes seemed to know everything, but she still decided to take the pill. Hee-rang Ng though followed her sister's plan, pretended to take the pill, and then threw it away. At midnight, everyone in the house was asleep. Hee-rang carefully crawled out and secretly went outside to watch TV. The charcoal stove was already on in the room. Hee-rang's family wanted to kill themselves with toxic smoke. When Hee-jin returned to the bedroom, he tried to wake his sister, but she wouldn't, and the whole family was dead. There was much arguing at the funeral about why she hadn't gone with the family. Hee-rang heard it all, and her heart ached even more. Hee-rang wept and blamed herself, thinking that if she hadn't believed her sister, she could have gone with the family. Her foster mother, seeing this, felt immense compassion and immediately embraced and comforted Hee-rang, accepting her as her daughter. Returning to reality, Hee-rang silently thanked her foster mother. If it weren't for her, Hee-rang would have foolishly given up on life. It turned out that being alive was the best thing. The next day, Hee-rang returned to the mechanic, wanting to persuade him to give a statement. Hee-jong wanted to use his own experience to teach the mechanic a life lesson. His parents wanted him to die with them, but he was still alive. Alone in this world, everything seemed ridiculous. Hee-jong once thought his parents were even more cruel than strangers. The child then had only two choices: either be with his parents or live with the haunting memories. But Hee-jin found a better solution: to live in the face of and overcome fear. Hee-jin hoped the mechanic would choose the same. His attitude changed somewhat. At their next meeting, the mechanic promised to reveal everything to Hee-jin. He had chosen the third way of life, bravely confronting her fears. Hee-rang thanked and praised the mechanic for doing a good job. She led him inside to recount the story. Meanwhile, Dong-do was waiting in front of Chief-en's courtroom. He had something to say to him. Chief-en didn't like Dong-do but still went with him to the cafe to discuss. Dong-do wanted to inquire about the Mdung electronic case. Chief-en's expression immediately changed. He asked Dong-do in return, "If I tell you, what will you do?" The case has been over for 17 years. Dong-do is truly helpless. but the mistakes then will certainly lead to mistakes later. Dong-do doesn't want to miss any details, but Chief still doesn't answer. Instead, he threatens Dong-do, "It's best you stay away from Mdung Electronics if you don't want to bring trouble upon yourself." Dong-do is unwilling to watch Chief leave. After returning to the office, Dong-do attended the meeting of the 5th Bureau. Everyone had investigated. The victims who borrowed money from Gold Card Credit were all referred by the bank. Initially, the victims went to the bank to borrow money, but they were told that the victims did not qualify and gave the victims a Gold Card Credit business card. Most of the victims were naive teenagers who fell into the trap of Gold Cat Credit. However, the mechanic was a different case. He didn't go to the bank to borrow money but was introduced to Gold Cat Credit by a friend. This friend worked at a car wash but drove a luxury car and used designer goods. Perhaps the friend also had a side job as a Gold Cat Credit broker. The money he got was from referrals. A colleague suddenly remembered seeing the broker when they went to Gold Card Credit to investigate. Even stranger, the operations of the bank and the car wash company both revolved around Gold Card Credit. 3 systems with no connection on paper seemed to be closely linked. To clarify this matter, Dong-do suggested investigating the bank and the car wash company. Then, the Southern Bureau hired students to pose as borrowers to seek advice from the bank. Most poor students had already used it. The preferential loan for university students was difficult to obtain further loans. Gold Cat Credit even provided loans to those with bad credit, so students flocked to them in droves. After getting the information, her colleague immediately called he to tell her that she was extremely angry, that it was clearly taking advantage of state policies to put students and young people in a difficult position to trap them. Dong-do was no stranger to this society. The direct murderer would go to jail, but those who used money to kill people were always protected. He was determined to make all of them pay the price. Unexpectedly, Dong-do received a phone call from the head of Department 4, who arranged a private meeting with him. That evening, Dong-do went to see the head of Department 4. The head reminded Dong-do not to continue investigating the Gold Card Credit case. But Dong-do was the kind of person who would see things through to the end. He refused and asked permission to leave. The head of Department 4 was angry. He would definitely regret it. Dong-do told him that he had never been afraid of threats. On the contrary, it was the head of Department 4 who should be afraid. Dong-do held a secret weapon in his hand, and the head of Department 4 became panicked. The next day, the head of Department 4 went to see Jun. He had found something that could bring down Mr. Zhang. This led to the disintegration of Department 5. Taking advantage of the opportunity to eliminate the obstacle, Dong-yu, Tezin could also force the director to resign. One arrow hits too many targets, but there are hidden dangers behind it. Tezin reminded the director of Department 4 to be careful. He seemed extremely confident with this move. Then an article was posted online about a high-ranking tax bureau official bribing the victim's family to prevent the victim from participating in the investigation. What started as an act of kindness by Wu Jiang, through malicious fabrications, was transformed into an unforgivable crime. Colleagues felt indignant on Wu Jiang's behalf. This was the result of misplaced kindness. Unexpectedly, someone from the supervisory board came to Bureau 5, wanting to arrest a corruption investigator. Wu Jiang was furious. He knew the person behind this was targeting him. "Don't you dare touch my employee." The supervisory board ignored Wu Jiang's words and took the employee away. Before one problem was solved, another arose. Wu Jiang receives a call from a friend who is avoiding inspection. The General Directorate is holding an emergency meeting but hasn't informed Wu Jiang. He wants Wu Jiang to come immediately because he suspects something bad is about to happen. It turns out this is a meeting to force the director to resign, with the Leadership Council exploiting Wu Jiang's scandal. Recalling the director's previous promise, the director realizes this is Tun's plan. Seeing his triumphant attitude, the director was furious. The leadership pressed him with questions, demanding an explanation. Why hadn't the main character arrived yet? Had Wu Jiang already run away? The director was speechless. He only promised an answer soon and left. At this point, Wu Jiang drove to the headquarters. The director, still fuming, got into his car and drove away without saying a word. Wu Jiang wanted to know what had happened, so he went to see Deputy Director Kim. The people in the Allied group blamed Wu Jiang for his slight oversight, which caused the entire director to be implicated. How could they possibly take down Dun like that? Deputy Director Kim had to come up with a solution. It's best for Wu Jiang to temporarily put aside all the ongoing investigations and closely supervise his subordinates. Deputy Chief Kim will handle the aftermath. Wu Jiang was about to object, but Deputy Chief Kim immediately silenced him. This wasn't persuasion, but an order. Wu Jiang was forced to obey. Now that the enemy had fired the first shot, Dong-do couldn't sit idly by. He went to see the police chief to investigate his father's case from years ago. To get some information from him, Dong-do threatened the police chief with bribery, warning that he could ruin his entire career. Unexpectedly, the police chief easily compromised. It turned out he had discovered that he had been betrayed by the head of Department 4. After the accident, music happened. The head of Department 4 came to ask the police chief to erase the black box from Dong-do's father's car. However, the police chief later saw his subordinates secretly handing over the evidence to the head of Department 4. The police chief didn't know what it was, but confirmed it was related to Dong-do's father's death. Dong-do was extremely pleased. With the information he obtained, he promised to use it well. Later, when the head of Department 4 arrived, it was too late. Dong-do had left. His anger towards the police chief wouldn't solve anything, so he hurriedly drove back to headquarters. On the way, the head of Department 4 called and asked reporters to write an article exposing Dong-do's past. He was a scoundrel who helped businesses evade taxes and was unworthy of working at the National Tax Bureau. He immediately told the reporter to get to work and then hung up, but this was still part of Dong-do's plan. Dong-do even went to see the reporter to tease him, asking him to write an article according to the director of Department BS instructions. Then, Dong-do called the director of Department 4, requesting a meeting. Dong-do hung up without giving him a chance to refuse. The head of Department 4 became even more resentful. That evening, Lawyer PQ arrived at the meeting place with Tun. He had a favor to ask, so he was extremely cordial. Lawyer PQ presented two names who were likely to win the presidential election. Their job was to wait and pour money into the candidate with the higher percentage of votes. This would become a solid foundation later on. The question is, where will the money come from? There's a regular tax audit coming up every 5 years. Sun just needs to help the businesses on the tax-exempt list, and they'll get a decent amount of money. Sun isn't in a hurry to agree because he feels something is suspicious. Why aren't these names related to the PQ Corporation? The PQ lawyer thought Tun was still holding a grudge about being stood up last time, so he explained to him. Jun wasn't a petty person. He would definitely do whatever benefited him. On the other side, the head of Department 4 returned to the headquarters. Dong-do was waiting there. He threatened Dong-do if he didn't stop what he was doing, Dong-do would die.
Dong-du remène d'Unafred.
He always declared that he came here for revenge. Nothing could make him back down. At least Dong-do was different from the head of Department 4. He had nothing to lose. The head of Department 4 angrily grabbed Dong-do, when suddenly T-jun arrived. The three of them went into the office to talk. Dong-do took out the newspaper article about his past and asked Jun to help him take it down. The head of Department 4 acted on his own initiative and is now pale. Tun coldly asks Dong-do, "Why should I help you?" Dong-do mentions Goldcat Credit, a case previously handled by Department 4, but it's still operating and has even expanded, linking with banks and car wash companies. This definitely involves someone in the tax bureau protecting him. The head of Department 4 couldn't take it anymore and told Dong-do to shut up. Dong-do added one last sentence, "I'll drag a few people down with me too." After saying that, he stood up and left. Dong-do thought T-jun was also involved with Goldcat, but in reality, this was something the head of Department 4 was secretly doing behind his back. Tae-sun accidentally discovered that the list of lawyers PQ gave him at the restaurant also included the name Goldcat, a credit card holder. He never expected that the head of Department 4 would dare to collude with others and plot against him behind his back. Tae-sun slapped the head of Department 4 several times. If this matter isn't handled properly, the head of Department 4 might be dead. The head of Department 4 bowed his head in apology and left. Outside, he met Wu Jiang, who wanted to know why the head of Department 4 had managed to take him down, and still wouldn't let go of Department 5. The head of Department 4 angrily replied that his goal was to travel. That morning, Department 5's investigation into Goldcat yielded results. After days of hardship and perseverance, officers from Department 5 discovered Goldcard's method of transferring money. They used car wash employees to clean their vehicles and then placed cash in the trunks for the recipients. With the cooperation of the police, these illegal activities were exposed. Dong-do received the news and rushed back to Department 5 to report, but the scene at Department 5 was extremely strange. The head of Department 4 was also present. Oh-jang angrily questioned Dong-do about borrowing a large sum of money from Goldcat and helping them evade a tax audit. This was all a charade orchestrated by the head of Department 4. But Dong-do remained silent, offering no explanation, as he had decided to take a risky step. Previously, Dong-do and Wu Jiang believed that to clean up the corrupt system in the tax bureau, they needed an honest leader like Wu Jiang. Dong-do promised to help him get the highest position. Wu Jiang could use Dongdu as a pawn. Initially, Wu Jiang hesitated, but now the situation has arisen. Wu Jiang doesn't dare trust Dongdu. He announced Dongdu's dismissal from the bureau 5 years ago, much to everyone's astonishment. But there was one thing Dongdu didn't foresee. Du Han had requested a transfer from the supervisory board to Bureau 5 to replace Dongdu. The Goldcat credit case that Dongdu was handling would also be transferred to Du Han for processing. Dongdu couldn't accept this. If he didn't finish it himself, he'd let another colleague handle it. They didn't want Du Han to sit back and reap the benefits, and besides, Dongdu was afraid. Du Han then dropped the case. So many people have been terribly harmed by Goldcat's credit system, and now it's time for them to get justice. The two of them don't need to argue anymore. Chief Park appears. Carrying orders from his superiors, the case has been handed over to Department 3 for handling. They also collected all the evidence that Department 5 had just obtained. Dongdu is extremely resentful. He curses everyone in the National Tax Bureau, from top to bottom. No one is decent. Chief Park then exposes Dongdu's past. He's not exactly a good person either. Dongdu couldn't fight off an entire pack of dogs, so he decided to leave first. He promised to return and take revenge. However, Rang was still unwilling to let Dongdu go. She followed him, trying to persuade Ojiang to help Dongdu claim credit, but Ojiang didn't bother. Rang changed the subject, dismissing Dongdu and not mentioning it again. But why let someone like Du Han manage things? Unexpectedly, Du Han was sitting silently in the room. Ojiang asked Jiang with amusement, "Du Han, what do you have to say next?" Jiang, feeling embarrassed, avoided eye contact. Afterward, Jiang returned to her office and found that Dongdu had already packed his things. Jiang wondered, "Are you just going to leave like that?" Now Dongdu had no other choice but to accept it. Rang had a question. Why did Dongdu borrow money from Goldcat without discussing it with everyone beforehand? Not only Rang, but all the team members wondered. Dongdu couldn't give them a clear explanation yet. At this moment, he could only bow his head and apologize. That evening, he shivered as he went to his wife's memorial service. Sun's father-in-law is the chairman of Sangdu Construction Company, a small branch of the PQ Group. After his daughter's death, their relationship became like fire and water. Sun's father-in-law demanded that Du Han return to work for Sangdu Construction. He didn't want his grandson. Sun, walking down the same path as the National Tax Bureau, was full of corrupt and dirty people, and Sun provoked his father-in-law. Filthy people like us are just aiding other filthy people. Jun was referring to his father-in-law's company. If he hadn't been so accommodating all these years, Sangdu wouldn't have stood strong until now. His father-in-law was so angry he had a heart attack. Yun smiled triumphantly. The funeral service ended quickly. His brother-in-law came to talk to Jun privately, feeling sorry for him. In the tax bureau, it's always a case of the strong devouring the weak, forming factions and betraying each other. Jun even has to run around covering up his own wrongdoings. He doesn't even know if he'll get the director's position, but Jun reminds his brother-in-law to stop meddling in other people's affairs and focus on Sangdu Construction, as there will be a regular tax audit soon. At that time, he fears Sangdu Construction will be in trouble. Dun bluntly stated he would not help and would leave his wife's side to fend for itself. His sister-in-law then took out a voice recorder. The recording contained information about Du Han's alleged bribery. If Dun didn't help the company avoid a tax audit, his sister-in-law threatened to have Du Han fired from the National Tax Bureau and forced him to return to work at Sangdu Construction. Tun wasn't worried at all. The next day, Tun went to see lawyer PQ, asking him to put pressure on the construction of the parachute. But lawyer PQ had a condition. Tun had to guarantee that Goldcat's credit wouldn't be compromised. Tun sensed something suspicious about Goldcat. Lawyer PQ didn't want to reveal it. Tun was extremely angry. After returning to the office, Lawyer Tun added PQ to the list of enemies. He also called and ordered the head of Department B to investigate all units related to the PQ group. Deputy Director Kim learned of this and immediately joined forces with the inspectors to plan an investigation. They thought that Jun couldn't withstand PQ's restraint and was preparing to retaliate, waiting for both sides to suffer heavy losses, so that Deputy Director Kim would be the one to benefit. At this time, Dongdu was causing trouble everywhere. He went to another credit company to apply for another loan. As a result, Dongdu was punched until he was bruised. Jiang heard the news and rushed to the hospital, but Dongdu had already gone home. Jiang returned to look for Dongdu, but he refused to open the door. Dongdu was lying in his room, clutching his wound, not wanting to involve anyone. The next day, Dongdu continued his actions. He went to a car rental company, borrowed a car, and then drove it to a designated location. Dong-doo's repeated actions of circumventing the rental company's rules have left the rental company staff puzzled. They wonder what he's up to. Meanwhile, a meeting between Bureau 3 and Bureau 5 is underway. Discussing the Gold Card credit case, Chief Park argues that Bureau 5's seizure of Gold Card's funds is unreasonable because they lack evidence proving Gold Card used loans to coerce borrowers into defrauding insurance companies. The Tax Bureau has found a list of lending companies that owe taxes, suspecting they are linked to Gold Card credit. If this is confirmed, it proves that the tax debt was transferred to GoCat credit and used as illegal lending funds. Since it's a loophole, the source of the money will naturally not be known to the Tax Bureau. Chief Fong Park, looking enthusiastic, immediately led his team to investigate. In fact, he had received orders from the head of Department 4 to feign an investigation as a formality. Chief Park ignored all the important details, but because these were all tax-evading companies, Chief Park still had to collect taxes. He colluded with the loan sharks, helping these businesses lower their business capital requirements so they wouldn't have to pay much tax. Thanks to this, Chief Park also pocketed a sum of money. Meanwhile, Department 5 was at a complete standstill. They were only able to investigate based on documents brought back by Department 3, so they couldn't find any useful evidence. At this time, the credit director came to Golk and ordered the thugs to deal with the victims who cooperated with Department 5. Based on the surveillance footage from the hallway, the thugs knew the girl had hidden in the massage room, and also knew she had been with Dong-do. The thugs followed the trail to the hospital, asking the staff if they had seen a girl like that. The staff didn't recognize the girl, but they recognized Dong-do. The thugs, music, immediately went to Dong-do's place. On the other side, the girl was out shopping when she suddenly received a call from the building's security guard. Someone had come looking for her, and the girl felt strange. Hearing the security guard's description, she quickly realized it was the thugs. The girl fled in fear, luckily managing to get into a taxi before the thugs caught up. At the same time, another gang of thugs came to the broker's place, first beating him up for revealing their whereabouts and causing them trouble. The thugs obtained the mechanic's information, then went to find him. They stormed into the mechanic's house, beating him senseless. Just then, the mother arrived and rushed to stop the thugs from beating her son. He aggressively pushed the mother down. She angrily found the door handle and gave the thug a taste of their love affair. Afterward, the mother and daughter mechanics were arrested and taken to the police station. Although it was legitimate self-defense, they had killed someone. Hearing the news, he quickly called Dong-do to the police station. The mechanics begged them for help. They absolutely did not want this to happen.
Dong-do was furious.
All the crimes stemmed from Goldcat credit. He decided to put an end to this. The next day, Dong-do went to Bureau 5 to attend the disciplinary meeting for him. Because of Goldcat credit's provincial loan offense, Mr. Jiang allowed Dong-do to defend himself. He wanted to turn the disciplinary meeting into a public internal investigation. First, Dong-do reveals the reason he had to borrow 200 million from Goldcast credit. Dong-do not only used that money to bribe all the people at the tax office to get himself suspended from work, creating an opportunity for himself to act freely, but also used the 200 million to collect nearly 50 billion from credit companies related to Goldcast. Based on the principle of capital rotation, Dong-do rented a car from a rental company, using it as collateral, for music, to borrow money from provincial credit companies. The place where Dong-do parked his car wasn't random. It was right in front of the credit company, which was using the car's black box. Dong-do had been monitoring their every move. After collecting 50 billion, Dong-do disappeared without a trace, defaulting on the debt, triggering a domino effect that caused credit companies related to Goldcast to go bankrupt one after another. What does 50 billion mean? According to the principle of tax collection, which is 1/40th of working capital, those credit companies that evaded taxes should be taxed even more. At the same time, the list of tax-evading credit companies was also manipulated by people at Bureau 5. 3 of those companies were not under Goldcast's management. According to Dong-do's calculations, the tax revenue should have been 1.5 billion, but Department Head Park only collected 89 million. Either he embezzled the money, or he colluded with the credit company to evade taxes. Department Head Park vehemently protested. Music, angrily claiming Dong-do had no evidence. Just as the loan company owner burst in, he had already bribed Chief Park, but the 5th Bureau still seized all his assets. This time, Chief Park vehemently denied everything. The furious Chief Bureau Chief declared that Chief Park was suspended from his duties pending investigation. She would show no mercy to anyone who, for the sake of harming a colleague, broke the law and dared to touch Dong-do, whom she valued most. Chief Park's life was over. He begged the 4th Bureau Chief for help. But the chief was still preoccupied with his own affairs. One enemy has been eliminated from the game. Dong-do turned to look at the head of Department 4. Now it was his turn. Based on the black boxes from the rental cars, Dong-do discovered a white car that frequently visited the lending company. This was the head of Department 4's car. He still denied that he was only there for inspection. Dong-do suspected that Goldcat's credit director had connections with the head of Department 4. He gave the head of Department 4 a chance to contact him. He asked him to bring the loan contract and ledger, and Dong-do would consider returning the money. 50 billion is not a small amount. Dong-do also gave the staff of Department B a chance. When they investigated Goldcard credit, if they accidentally hid any related records, simply handing them over would be forgiven. If Department 5 discovered it, Department 4 would have no way out. The staff of Department 4 became anxious. The head of Department 4 led them back to his office. He reminded the staff not to let Dong-do deceive them, otherwise they would all be in big trouble. The staff of Department 4 became confused, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, Do-hun Han met with Dong-do privately, questioning his reason for taking such a risky move. "Aren't you afraid the thugs will come and beat you up?" Dong-do remained calm. This was the only way to expose the true face of Goldcat credit. Even if Dong-do sacrificed himself, there wouldn't be any more victims later. Do-hun angrily wrestled with Dong-do, just as he walked in. It's unclear why Do-hun was so worried about Dong-do actually. He was also a person with a conscience. It was Yi-jang's turn to question Dong-do about why he decided to take such a risk without informing his teammates. Dong-do replied exactly as he had told Di-hun earlier. His only goal was to ensure the evildoer received his just punishment. Later, everyone returned to the office and found Tun there. The head of Department 4 took the opportunity to request the Gold Cat case back from Department 5. However, the case originally belonged to Department 5. 2 years ago, Oh-jang, disillusioned with life, didn't want to investigate it anymore and handed it over to Department B. Tae-jun wanted to cover up for Department 4, saying it was due to Wu Jiang's irresponsibility. Indeed, Wu Jiang couldn't say anything. Tun decided to follow the request of the head of Department 4. Everyone in Department 5, including Do-hun, was resentful because they had let the big fish slip through their fingers. Afterwards, Tae-jun and the head of Department 4 went into the office to talk privately. Although he handed the case over to the head of Department 4, it doesn't mean he forgave the head of Department 4 for his betrayal. It's just that Sun had lost all his trusted lieutenants and was forced to keep the head of Department 4. For other purposes, Sun suggested a solution to the head of Department 4: find someone to impersonate Credit Director Gold and create fake loan contracts and accounting records. When the head of Department 4 confessed to the National Tax Bureau, he expressed gratitude to Sun, but as soon as he left, the head of Department 4 changed his attitude. Meanwhile, Department 5 gathered to discuss the next course of action. Do-hun decided to leave, believing that all options were exhausted and Department 4 would surely use the opportunity to perfectly cover up the case. Do-hun was not only disappointed in himself but also in his father. However, Department 5 did not give up. They guessed that the head of Department 4 would leave. They went to find the credit manager to remind him to hide well. Department 5 decided to follow the head of Department 4. In the evening, the head of Department 4 went out. 2 officers from Department 5 drove ahead. Dong-do and Yi-rang followed right behind. This was in case the head of Department 4 chased after them, which was not unexpected. The head of Department 4 discovered that Department 5 was following him, so he went to a hotel. He took the elevator to the 9th floor. The officers from Department 5 who followed him lost sight of him. The head of Department 4 escaped. He took a taxi and continued on his way. This time, Dong-do and Yi-jang didn't lose sight of him. They followed the head of Department 4 to a restaurant. Here, the head of Department 4 meets with the credit director to discuss a plan to find a scapegoat. Dong-do and Yi-jang are again stopped outside. Dong-do introduces himself as being from the tax department, and if the staff doesn't let them in, he insists on checking the restaurant's taxes. Frightened, the staff then lead them both inside. However, they were one step too late. The credit director had already left, replaced by the family of the head of Department 4. He looked extremely pleased with himself. Dong-do immediately returned to the reception desk. Was there another exit from the restaurant? Following the staff's directions, Dong-do and Yi-rang went to the parking garage. However, the credit manager had just gotten into his car and driven away. Yi-rang wanted to chase after him, but Dong-do stopped her because he recognized who the credit manager was. Then they both returned to the office. It turned out that the credit manager was an assistant to lawyer PQ, and it seemed that his teeth marks were everywhere. Dong-do immediately remembered his father's situation. It was lawyer PQ who caused his father to go to prison. After that, Dong-do retrieved all the documents related to the PQ Corporation that he had collected over the past 4 years. Dong-do was extremely angry. All the suffering people endured was for PQ to make dirty money. Dong-do decided he had to do something. Just then, Wu Jiang came to see Dong-do. He had come up with a potentially effective plan to leverage the power of the media and call for justice for the victims of Goldcat. The government certainly wouldn't let this go unpunished. Of course, whichever unit has the people's support will have the right to investigate the case. After all they've done, Director Jiang has strong faith. The victim will place their hope in Department 5, which is not unexpected by Director Jiang. As soon as the news spread, the old commissioner went to see Tezin. He was one of the 2 presidential candidates. The old commissioner was a humanitarian who couldn't stand by and watch people being oppressed. The old commissioner asked Sun to fulfill the victim's wishes and have Department 5 investigate the gold credit fraud case. Then Sun called the head of Department 4 to his office to show him the published article. Things have reached this point. Sun requests that the head of Department B return the case to Department 5. Very quickly, a press conference is held. Wu Jiang declares that he will work with Department 5 to handle the case properly. He also apologizes, saying that if Wu Jiang hadn't been irresponsible 2 years ago, so many people wouldn't have been harmed. Although he knew he would be cursed, Wu Jiang knew this would be the starting point for his political career. Dong Zhuang would help him climb to the top to deal with all the festering sores of the National Tax Bureau. The first thing Wu Jiang had to do was admit his mistakes. On the other side, the vice chairman called lawyer PQ to his office. After hearing about Goldcat credit, he had someone investigate. The vice chairman beat lawyer PQ several times. Because he dared to use PQ's money to establish gold credit, it was nothing short of a slush fund. PQ's lawyer still denies the charges, but the vice president has decided to get rid of him. At this time, Dong-do and He Jiang went to see the mechanic. To check on him, the mechanic wanted to thank the 2 of them. Thanks to the help of the police and the police department, they found evidence to exonerate his mother. Finally, the mechanic realized he shouldn't compromise his integrity for money, because there were so many people around who cared about him. He Rang was overjoyed to hear this, and afterwards, He Rang and Dong-do went sightseeing, reflecting on what had just happened. He Rang gave Dong-do more good news. After escaping from the thugs last time, the girl was staying at a friend's house and was being very well cared for. Dong-do felt happy for the girl, hoping everyone would find joy in life. However, Dong-do still had things to do. That evening, he arranged to meet the head of Department 4. Dong-do transferred 21 billion to him, saying it was to repay the Goldcat credit. This would not only put him in trouble with the thugs, but Tun would also kill him. The head of Department 4 was at his wit's end, begging Dong-do to spare him and not go any further. Dong-do sued, returning the evidence he had obtained from the police. Initially, the head of Department 4 was hesitant, but when Dong-do said he knew who the culprit was, the head of Department 4 no longer needed to cover up, because sooner or later that person would eliminate him. The head of Department 4 reluctantly handed over the button that T. Jun-on had dropped at the scene. Their conversation was overheard by Wu Jiang, who then learned Dong-do's true purpose in coming to Department 5. Afterward, Dong-do went to see Tun. He didn't directly expose him, but instead they had tea and talked. When Dong-do returned, he pretended to pick up the button from the ground. T. Jun's expression immediately changed. It was the button his late wife had given him. Dong-do also confirmed his suspicions. T. Jun is the one who killed his father. Then Dong-do went to the scene of the accident. Based on the account of the head of Department 4, Dong-do also figured out the events of his father's case. After the head of Department 4 met with Tun and informed him that Dong-do's father was holding a black book, T. Jun went to find Dong-do's father to negotiate. He begged Dong-do's father to forgive him this one time, out of respect for their long-time friendship. However, Dong-do's father not only refused to hand over the black book but also recorded the conversation, gathering more evidence to incriminate T. Jun afterward. Dong-do's father drove away, but unexpectedly, T. Jun followed him. Dong-do's father deliberately drove to avoid T. Jun's view, causing him to almost crash into a truck. He regretted not being able to shake T. Jun off. Suddenly, a deer darted out into the road. Dong-do's father swerved to avoid the deer but unfortunately crashed into the guardrail. The car was left hanging precariously over the edge of a cliff. T. Jun got out to check. Dong-do's father begged him to save his mother. Taking advantage of the situation, T. Jun wanted to retrieve the audio recording. Dong-do's father reluctantly gave it to him. But T. Jun's greed didn't stop there. He demanded the black notebook. During the struggle with Dong-do's father, the cover of the black notebook was torn. Dong-do's father grabbed T. Jun's shirt button. However, Tae-jun didn't notice. He left the scene in fear, abandoning Dong-doo's father to his fate. Back in reality, Dong-doo walked sadly down the street. The person he and his father trusted most turned out to be a cruel man. Dong-doo was preoccupied with planning his revenge, standing dazed in the middle of the road, nearly hit by a car. Luckily, he saved Dong-doo just in time. He knew Dong-doo's purpose in joining the National Tax Bureau, to avenge his father. He wanted to help Dong-doo. His colleagues at Department 5 wouldn't abandon him either. But this was extremely dangerous. Dong-doo didn't want anyone else to get into trouble. He advised Dong-doo to trust her and everyone else. Dong-doo thanked for her enthusiasm. He still needed more time to think. On the other hand, after the plan to use gold card credit to acquire PQ Group shares was exposed, PQ's lawyer called someone to handle all the related parties. Then he submerged his phone in water to destroy the evidence. The first person to be shot was the credit director. When he returned to the parking garage, he discovered two suspicious individuals. These were security guards sent by PQ's lawyer. To silence the credit director carefully avoided the security guards and returned to his room to pack his belongings. But before he could escape, the guards sneaked into the bathroom. The credit director heard the noise and went in. A few seconds later, the man who had attacked emerged from the bathroom, his shoes still covered in fresh blood. The credit director was nowhere to be seen. One suspect had been dealt with. At the same time, the head of Department 4 received an anonymous message warning that someone was coming to deal with him. The terrified director of Department 4 drove back with the intention of packing his belongings and fleeing. On the way, he discovered that the car's foot brake was broken. The director of Department 4 had an accident. Fortunately, he only suffered minor injuries. Later, the rescue workers arrived to repair the car and informed the director of Department 4. The car's brakes were tampered with, and the head of Department 4 immediately thought of Tae-jun, because Tae-jun had previously told him that if the plan failed, the head of Department 4 would surely die. Then the head of Department 4 risked going to Tae-jun, begging him to spare the mother, but it was clearly not Tae-jun who did it. He secretly wondered who was secretly plotting against him and daring to harm his people. Dong-doo was determined to find this person. Meanwhile, Woo Jiang arranged to meet Dong-doo and eavesdrop on their conversation with the head of Department 4. Woo Jiang had already learned Dong-doo's true purpose, revenge for his father. Woo Jiang didn't blame Dong-doo for hiding things from everyone. On the contrary, he wanted to help Dong-doo, but he disagreed. Dong-doo being the villain alone was enough. Woo Jiang had to maintain his integrity to go further in his political career, and Dong-doo would help him do that. The National Tax Bureau needed an honest leader so that the people could live in peace. Oh Jung understood Dong-doo's good intentions and didn't want to argue any further. That morning, Dong-doo went to see his prosecutor friend. Yesterday, the prosecutor received an anonymous complaint call from a Sancho Bank employee. The prosecutor knew this was the bank under investigation by Bureau 5, related to the Goldcat credit scheme, and wanted Dong-doo's help. According to the whistleblower's account, there is a mysterious figure at Sancho Bank called Cho-do, who specializes in handling businesses whose loan applications are rejected, causing them to go bankrupt. The total number of victims has reached 15. The prosecutor gives Dong-doo a USB drive containing a recorded phone call, which includes useful clues for the investigation. Dong-doo promises to try to find out more. On another side, someone secretly used Sancho Bank's computer to send a letter about the figure to Shu. When the bank employees read the letter on most of the computers, they were extremely confused. The manager went to reassure them, not rushing to confirm the truth of the letter but trying to find out who sent it. Through the security cameras, the manager discovered an employee named Han secretly entering and leaving the office. He was also absent from the company today, making the manager even more certain that employee Han was the one who sent the letter, and no one else. At this time, Woo Jiang came to see Deputy Director Kim, requesting her permission to investigate Sancho Bank, as it was related to Goldcat credit. Deputy Director Kim was in a very difficult position because her husband worked at Sancho Bank. Moreover, her husband had close ties with lawyer PQ. If the investigation reveals that her husband is involved in Goldcat credit, Deputy Director Kim's political career will be affected to some extent. Deputy Director Kim pretended to agree with Woo Jiang as a formality, then she went back to her room to rack her brains for a solution. Unexpectedly, Deputy Director Kim received a message from her husband. He couldn't go out to dinner with her today. Deputy Director Kim called her husband to check on him. She dialed lawyer PQ's number. Deputy Director Kim knew the two were together again, and felt helpless with her husband. Afterward, she deleted the call with lawyer PQ and left the office to go home. That evening, the bank manager came to employee Han's house wanting to persuade him to confess. saying that what was written in the letter was not true. Employee Han had gone this far. How could he easily agree? The manager took out employee Han's file. It turned out that he was also a criminal. Moreover, employee Han had committed the crime of accepting bribes. Seeing his secret exposed, employee Han agreed to the manager's request. Anyway, they are all people who make money illegally. Employee Han only had one question. What is the relationship between Sancho Bank and Goldcat Credit? The manager admitted to him that it was indeed a linked network. As long as Sancho Bank doesn't collapse, and with the cover-up from people in the National Tax Bureau, credit institutions like Gold will keep dying and coming back to life. After finishing his work, the manager left employee Han's house. Unexpectedly, Han had tricked the manager. He recorded the entire conversation. Accidentally, employee Han turned on the speakerphone, causing the manager to notice. He turned back, trying to snatch Han's phone. A scuffle ensued. Unfortunately, the manager was pushed and hit his head, lying motionless as if dead. Employee Han was extremely panicked. He quickly pulled the manager and hid him in the trunk of his car. Employee Han realized he'd left his phone behind, pressed the automatic trunk close button, and ran into the house. Then both of them disappeared without a trace. There was a meeting at Bureau 5 that morning. Du-hun had now been promoted to head of Bureau 5. Dong wanted to investigate Sancho Bank because he believed it was involved in Goldcat Credit. However, this had not yet been confirmed. Du-hun only sent 2 people to look for more clues. Department 5 still had many pending cases. Du-hun asked his colleagues to finish them. They left dejectedly. Dong-du stayed behind to remind Du-hun that he absolutely couldn't be left out of the 2 investigators. Du-hun allowed Dong-du to choose another partner. Then Dong-du returned to the office. Music. He lifted everyone's spirits, taking out the recording of the whistleblower's call. There was definitely a problem at Sancho Bank. Dong-du promised to find out quickly. He rang to go investigate with him. However, before Dong-du could leave, he unexpectedly received a call from the prosecutor. Dong-du and he rang immediately went to Sancho Bank. At the prosecutor's office's investigation meeting, the prosecutor has found the sender of the letter, who is employee Han. But now he has become a suspect. In a murder case, the police found 2 bloodstains in employee Han's house and another person's house. Both of these people have disappeared without a trace. The reason the police identified employee Han as the culprit is because after the incident, security cameras recorded him withdrawing money. The prosecutor speculated that the events unfolded as follows. Employee Han's account suddenly had 16 million, possibly bribe money. An unidentified person discovered this. Upon arriving at Han's house to expose him, a dispute arose between the 2 parties, and Han eliminated an unidentified person. Afterward, he went to an ATM near his house, withdrew money, and fled with the funds. The prosecutor was very clever. He wanted to use this opportunity to investigate Sancho Bank. The bank's director, Music, did not refuse. All the staff were willing to assist the prosecution. Dong-du still found many things suspicious. After the meeting ended, Dong-du and he rang met privately with the prosecutor. Unexpectedly, the prosecutor shared Dong-du's opinion. They even suggested that employee Han was the one who died, the reason being to cover up the letter. However, this was only speculation. To know the truth, they needed to find employee Han or the unidentified person. Dong-du and he rang would handle this. That evening, lawyer PQ went to the restaurant to meet Tun. The 2, who used to be business partners, were now like oil and water. Tae-jun taunted lawyer PQ. Does your butt still hurt? It turned out that Tun was the one who leaked the Goldcat credit case to Vice President PQ. He laughed triumphantly, thinking that anyone who betrayed Tae-jun would meet the same fate. Lawyer PQ couldn't swallow this insult. Someone was eavesdropping outside. Unbeknownst to him, it was to avoid the inspectors. He returned to report to Deputy Director Kim. Tun and lawyer PQ's relationship was very bad. Deputy Director Kim saw this as a good opportunity to bring down Sun. However, to avoid the inspectors reminding her, he had to deal with the Sancho Bank case first. Deputy Director Kim's husband also works there. If he gets arrested, Deputy Director Kim will also be embroiled in controversy. She's having a terrible headache. Later, Deputy Director Kim went home to wait for her husband. He came back from going out and boasted about having a very pleasant meeting with a business partner today. Deputy Director Kim knew her husband had been drinking with lawyer PQ. She wanted to remind him to stay away from lawyer PQ. The husband misunderstood Deputy Director Kim's meaning, thinking his wife was forbidding them from arguing. Deputy Director Kim was too lazy to explain, so she angrily went into the room. The husband didn't know what was wrong with his wife, but he didn't care either. In the morning, Dong-do and he Rang went to the phone number that the accuser had used to call the prosecutor's office. He Rang confirmed that it was indeed the number. They searched the area and found a truck parked in front of a grocery store. From the driver, they learned that the truck had been parked there for several days. Dong-do wanted to borrow the black box from the truck to check it. Just as Dong-do predicted, the person who sent the letter and the person who called to report to the prosecutor's office were the same person, the missing employee Han. Later, Dong-do, along with prosecutor, went to Sancho Bank. He showed the manager the video footage, stating that employee Han was the one who reported the incident and also sent the anonymous letter to the bank employees. He did everything he could to expose the secrets of Sancho Bank. There's no reason for him to take the bribe and then run away. Dong-do even suggested that employee Han had been secretly silenced. Dong-do wanted to redirect the investigation, but the bank manager disagreed, claiming Dong-do was trying to shift the blame onto the bank. Dong-do immediately realized that the director also had a secret to hide, and he didn't want to force the director. Knowing it would be fruitless, Dong-do excused himself and left. How the investigation proceeded was the director's prerogative. The prosecution would continue its investigation along the same lines, but Dong-do and prosecutor Yuan would surely meet at a crucial point. At this time, Wu Jiang went to meet someone, unexpectedly discovering that the bank manager was still alive and well. Wu Jiang suspected him of being involved in the disappearance of employee Han, as this was a tactic the manager had used 15 years ago in the Meng Electronic case, which caused Wu Jiang to suffer unjustly. 15 years ago, the Mdeng Electronic fraud case occurred, leading to the bankruptcy of numerous franchise companies, primarily because they were all suddenly forced to repay their loans by Sancho Bank. When Wu Jiang went to investigate with the bank manager, he only gave him a business card, saying that this person had accepted bribes from others and colluded to bankrupt those companies. Wu Jiang wondered how the manager knew so much, but he remained silent. Wu Jiang had no choice but to investigate on his own. Using the phone number on the business card, Wu Jiang contacted the man and arranged a meeting to confront the manager. The man unexpectedly agreed immediately. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he said he would expose the secrets of Sancho Bank. However, on the appointed day, Wu Jiang was unable to contact the man. He contacted the manager, asking if he had arrived at the meeting place. The manager said he couldn't go. Wu Jiang suspected the manager was up to something shady. Wu Jiang asked the police to help find the man, but he had simply vanished without a trace. The man was charged with missing person without any opportunity to testify. Back in reality, employee Han also found himself in a similar situation. Wu Jiang investigated the bank manager. There couldn't be a coincidence twice. What was the secret those two wanted to reveal? Where had the manager hidden them? The manager still pretended to be innocent, so Wu Jiang let him off the hook. At this time, Dong-do and he Jiang arrived at Sancho Bank and inquired about employee Han. He may be a little unfriendly, but he's an upright person. There was even an instance where staff member Han confronted his superior after discovering the superior's dishonest practices, but that happened quite a while ago, and no one remembers the specific details. Afterwards, Dong-do and he Jiang returned to the 5th Bureau and shared their findings with everyone. Colleagues also have new discoveries. Employee Han has a younger sister studying abroad. Why didn't he transfer the 16 million yuan bribe he received to his sister? That would have covered it up, wouldn't it? Dong-do believes that employee Han didn't accept the bribe because he is an upright person. However, employee Han acted impulsively, which could easily lead to trouble. According to Dong-do's speculation, the person who withdrew the money from employee Han's account was someone else. Since the police security cameras didn't capture the face, there were 2 bloodstains at the scene. It's possible an unidentified person killed employee Han, then staged the scene and withdrew the money before fleeing. The unidentified person knew employee Han's withdrawal password, either a relative or someone working at the bank. Who could this person be? Just then, Mr. Jiang returned and told his subordinates he had just met with a suspect. This case is no different from the disappearance 15 years ago. Mr. Jiang held a meeting, and the 2 people involved wanted to file a complaint. Sancho Bank disappeared using the same method. They were falsely accused of bribery and then told to abscond with the money. Looking deeper, the issue that employee Han wants to report is a problem that has been unresolved for 15 years. In fact, the Tax Bureau has received many complaints against Sancho Bank, but most investigations have yielded no results. It's highly possible that there are people within the Tax Bureau colluding with Sancho Bank. To clarify the whole story, Wu Jiang divided his investigation team and went with his subordinates to a factory. The factory manager had previously filed a complaint against Sancho Bank, but suddenly withdrew it. When Wu Jiang introduced himself as someone from the National Tax Bureau, the manager became visibly annoyed. He refused to talk, so Wu Jiang had to wait until evening, and after much pleading, the manager finally revealed some information. It turns out that behind Sancho Bank is the PQ Group. Private companies whose capital was suddenly withdrawn by Sancho Bank either went bankrupt, accepted becoming subsidiaries, or sold their production technology to the PQ Group. Thanks to this, the PQ Group grew stronger and stronger. Wu Jiang realized that 15 years ago, Mdung Electronics was no exception. Currently, they are also a small branch of the PQ Group. Dongdu went to employee Han's house to investigate with the police, and he discovered an anomaly. The names of the people who signed the loan contracts at the bank were not all employees of Han. Dongdu wondered why they brought back contracts that weren't written by him. He immediately took out his phone and photographed them. Then Dongdu and he went to meet someone, who was the girlfriend of employee Han. She was also an employee of Sancho Bank. The three of them went to a cafe to talk. It was then that Han's girlfriend revealed an embarrassing incident her boyfriend had done. Previously, the two of them were eating at a restaurant when they encountered gangsters demanding payment of a debt. For some reason, employee Han seemed worried, as if he was afraid of something. His girlfriend kept asking and found out that the restaurant owner was a client of employee Han. At the bank, he was in charge of drafting loan contracts. When the restaurant owner and her husband came for consultation, employee Han had reviewed their files. He confirmed there were no problems. The restaurant owner was eligible for a loan, but it turned out that employee Han was a character. Even though this restaurant was designated as a business ineligible for loans, employee Han still used sweet talk to entice customers to borrow money, telling them they could borrow any amount, and only at the last minute would the bank refuse the loan. The purpose was to prevent businesses from borrowing from other sources, ultimately forcing them to close down. Knowing that employee Han was doing such unethical work, his girlfriend immediately broke up with him. She couldn't stand the thought of her boyfriend ruining other people's lives. Dongdu retrieved the documents found at employee Han's house and asked Han's girlfriend about the name on them. Why isn't it the name of employee Han? What does it mean? This is actually quite simple. Usually, the contract will write the client's name. If the client was referred by someone else, then the name of the referrer will be written. This is an extremely important clue. Dongdu immediately returned to Bureau 5. He wanted to check other documents, but unexpectedly, most of them bore the same name, the bank manager. Dongdu gradually confirmed his initial suspicion. The manager was the one who killed the Korean employee. With the target identified, Dongdu's next plan would be easier. However, before Dongdu could begin his actions, Do-hun handed the investigation report to the head of Department 4, requesting that he disclose it to Sancho Bank to prepare for the investigation. Afterwards, the head of Department 4 arranged for the bank director to discuss the matter with the bank manager. The head of Department 4 advised the manager to calmly accept the investigation, stating that it was currently only suspicion and there was no concrete evidence. As long as the bank manager did not admit to it, the head of Department 4 assured him that he would be fine. The next day, the bank manager came to present himself. Dongdu and the prosecutor in charge of questioning him initially went smoothly. As predicted by the head of Department 4, Dongdu's team had no evidence, only asking the manager a few general questions to gauge his reaction. However, Dongdu unexpectedly changed the subject, stating his reasoning about the murder, leaving the bank manager stunned. The bank manager was also thrown into disarray. Dongdu said that on the night of the crime, before employee Han disappeared, the manager went to his house. The manager claimed it was to persuade employee Han to confess to accepting bribes. However, the next day the manager didn't go to work, claiming his son was sick and he had to stay home to look after him. But according to information from the school, the manager's son is still attending classes regularly. Dongdu also discovered another thing. Employee Han had blocked the manager's number. The two haven't been in contact for months. Dongdu suspects they're having a conflict. There's no reason for the manager to suddenly advise employee Han. Moreover, the manager went to employee Han's house completely on his own initiative, without making an appointment with him beforehand. Did he plan the murder in advance? The manager began to panic, trying to find an excuse, saying that employee Han was a close junior, and he only gave him advice out of friendship. Dongdu took out 2 photos, exposing the manager's lie. At that time, only 2 people were at the scene. The manager disguised himself as employee Han to fabricate a murder scene and then fled. The bank manager hastily explained. After escaping from the car trunk, he didn't return to employee Han's house but went straight to the hospital for treatment. The hospital records would record the time. If the manager wasted time fabricating the scene and disposing of the body, the time would certainly be inaccurate. Dongdu didn't give the manager a chance to think clearly. He used the events of 15 years ago to provoke him. Dongdu asked the manager if he had hidden employee Han's body in the same place as the man who reported him 15 years ago. The manager fell into a panic, and then the prosecutor questioned him. The prosecutor not only mentioned the anonymous letter at Sancho Bank but also presented documents found at employee Han's home, all of which bore the manager's name. This was the manager's motive for the crime. He killed employee Han to cover up the truth about the person involved. Even though the prosecutor wanted to shift all the blame onto employee Han, they presented 2 additional photos. Isn't that bloodstain in the photo yours? The manager's psychological defenses completely crumbled. The bank director stood outside stunned. Dongdu and the prosecutor began listening to the manager's explanation. That night, he really did have a conflict with employee Han. During the conflict, the manager was injured and fainted. Employee Han thought he was dead and tried to dispose of the body. The manager regained consciousness and took the opportunity to attack employee Han, but didn't kill him. After employee Han regained consciousness, the two reached an agreement. Employee Han would take the blame for accepting bribes instead of the manager. Dongdu still didn't trust the manager. 15 years ago, he dared to kill someone, so he wouldn't easily forgive employee Han now. The manager kept insisting he didn't kill anyone. The reason the man committed suicide 15 years ago was because he felt guilty towards the victim's family. At that time, the man was also a key figure in the downfall of Mdung Electronics. After the incident, he discovered that a family involved in Mdung Electronics committed suicide, including their young daughter. The man felt remorse and thought of suicide to atone for his sins. While the manager was dwelling on the past, Dongdu suddenly changed tactics. He knew the manager hadn't killed anyone. Dongdu only wanted to use the murder to provoke him into revealing the secret about the character. Although he didn't expect the manager to cooperate so well, he realized he'd been tricked too late. The manager was arrested for illegal bribery and negatively impacting the business. Then, the bank manager immediately informed the head of Department 4. The investigation report was submitted to Do-A. The head of Department 4 went to confront Du-Han, but was angered by Du-Han's smug expression. Now Du-Han wants to be a good person. He will side with Department 5. At this time, He-Jung went to find the girlfriend of employee Han. Because Dongdu made a new discovery, the handwriting on the loan application approved by employee Han was different from the handwriting on the complaint letter. It turned out that the complaint letter and the pretense of running away were both orchestrated by Han's girlfriend. Han's girlfriend began to admit everything. For her, the happiest moment of her life was being sincerely proposed to by employee Han. The most haunting moment was witnessing her father's death. When Han was 11 years old, one day she got out of school early and happily went home. Usually, her father wouldn't be home from work by then, but today Han found his shoes at the front door. She searched the whole house for him and found him hanging from a tree branch. At that time, Han's girlfriend was still young and didn't know what to do. She only knew to hug her father's legs and cry. She always wondered why her father abandoned her. Later, when Han's girlfriend grew up, she learned the truth. That day at the restaurant, they encountered a gang of debt collectors. After hearing Han's employee tell about the characters, even though Han's girlfriend tried to find out more, through the records at Sancho Bank, she discovered that her father's company was also a victim, with the person in charge being the bank manager. She immediately told this to employee Han. Initially, employee Han promised to confess and reveal all the secrets about Shu to the police, but his girlfriend decided to give him time. But employee Han hesitated, unable to make a decision even when faced with his girlfriend, who was a relative of the victim. That night, the manager and employee Han argued, and Han's girlfriend was also present. She thought her boyfriend would stand up to the manager. However, under threats to his life, employee Han made a deal with the bank manager, agreeing to take the blame for him. Han's girlfriend was extremely disappointed. After the bank manager left, Han's girlfriend revealed herself. She decided to take revenge on her boyfriend. Everyone knows what happened afterward. Han's girlfriend sacrificed her happiness to avenge her father. However, she has no regrets, only that she paid a very high price. Han's girlfriend was taken away by the police, and He-Jung felt sad for her story. Then Hagang returned to the office of the 5th Bureau and found an envelope on his desk containing an old newspaper. Hagang learned the truth. The person in charge of investigating the Mdung Electronic case was Wu Jiang. Hagang immediately checked online and found that the publicly available article was the 5th edition, which did not reveal the investigator's identity. The article she had was the 1st edition. He-Jung immediately went to confront Oh-Jan. The most painful thing in He-Jung's life was that the person who had killed her parents and sister was her superior.
O Jean ferido no Explanation.
He-Jung could no longer face Oh-Jan, so she decided to resign. Dongdu hurriedly chased after he rang to comfort her, but she showed no gratitude. He Rang immediately called a taxi and left. However, upon arriving, He Rang realized she had forgotten her wallet and phone at the office. The taxi fare was 12,200. Dongdu appeared like a savior, helping He Rang pay the fare. Instead of thanking him, He Rang slapped Dongdu. "Who gave you permission to follow me?" Dongdu was extremely surprised, but he didn't blame He Rang, understanding that she was angry. He Rang promised to pay Dongdu back and then left. He stubbornly clung on. Meanwhile, Wu Jiang was investigating the manager. He had completely regained his composure. The manager knew Wu Jiang had no evidence, so he came to him for questioning. As long as the manager didn't speak, he still had a chance to escape punishment. But Wu Jiang wasn't an ordinary person. He had once killed someone to investigate taxes. This had been publicly reported in the media, and the manager knew it well, but it wasn't actually true. This is still seen as a way for Wu Jiang to show off his power. However, the manager is not afraid of death. Wu Jiang then threatens his family. Wu Jiang is a lonely man with nothing to lose. He will do anything to expose the truth, unlike the manager who has many concerns. Faced with the threat from Wu Jiang, the bank's management gradually wavered. At the same time, Deputy Director Kim was also monitoring the situation at Sancho Bank. She went to negotiate with Director Jiang. Because Deputy Director Kim's husband worked at Sancho Bank, she feared being implicated. Deputy Director Kim wanted to cover it up discreetly, but in Wu Jiang's view, Deputy Director Kim was perfectly capable of avoiding trouble and didn't need to get herself into this mess because of her husband. Deputy Director Kim and Wu Jiang had different viewpoints. There were things she had to do to permanently bury the Sanju Bank case. Wu Jiang, not wanting that to happen, decided to publicly disclose the information to the media. He even said that the head of the National Tax Bureau was involved. Thanks to the power of public opinion, Wu Jiang hoped that the matter could not be easily covered up. However, Wu Jiang's actions angered his superiors. The first to mention it was Tun. He summoned Wu Jiang to his office. Sun could have ignored the public disclosure. Why drag the entire tax bureau into the smear campaign? Moreover, it was clearly a superior. Sun had never received a report about the Sancho Bank case. How was he supposed to explain it to the public? Jiang calmly replied. He advised Sun to explain it as he had instructed. Only now did Sun realize. Jiang was beyond his control. Tun only had 2 cards left, Wu Jiang and the head of Department 4. To prevent Wu Jiang from continuing to dominate, he suggested that Wu Jiang transfer the case to Department 3. Hearing this, Wu Jiang began negotiating that eliminating Sancho Bank was only part of the plan. Behind Sancho Bank was the PQ Group. The Meng electronic fraud case, which happened 15 years ago, was also manipulated by PQ. Initially, Oh Jung thought that Sun was cooperating with the PQ Group, but it turned out that Deputy Director Kim was the real villain. Clearly, she colluded with PQ but orchestrated the whole thing, making Sun the target of suspicion. Sun was treated like a joke for the past 15 years. Actually, Sun wasn't a bad person from the start. There were reasons why he became one. This time, Wu Jiang's target was Deputy Director Kim. Not only did he want to expose her true face, but Wu Jiang also wanted to clear his and T Jun's names. Hearing this, T Jun calmed down. Finally, he agreed to let Wu Jiang continue the investigation. On the other side, the head of Department 4 came to thank Dongdu after handing over the evidence of his father's accident to Dongdu. Indeed, Dongdu had helped him escape the Goldcat case, but the head of Department 4 shouldn't celebrate too soon. Although he escaped the Goldcat case, Dongdu put him on the corruption list. This list was about to be exposed by Wu Jiang, a painful blow, and the head of Department 4's face began to turn pale. He hurriedly ran to find T Jun for help. At this point, Sun was very calm. He called the head of Department 3 to his office to plan a tax investigation into the PQ Group. When the head of Department 4 arrived, she was stopped at the door by the head of Department 3. She said that Sun didn't want to meet with the head of Department 4, and if he didn't want things to get complicated, he should obediently submit his resignation. The head of Department 4 is practically finished. On the other hand, Lawyer PQ went to meet Deputy Director Kim, who is currently at odds with Sun. Lawyer PQ knows that Sun will not miss this opportunity to investigate the PQ Group's taxes. Currently, only Deputy Director Kim can salvage the situation. Lawyer PQ hopes she will side with him. Deputy Director Kim was somewhat hesitant, so Lawyer Pazoon threatened her husband. If they didn't want to be ruined by family problems, they should quickly help him resolve the crisis. Deputy Director Kim had no choice but to agree. However, before they could figure out how to deal with Sun, they rushed out. What problem caused these two powerful figures to panic so much? At this time, Under Sun's direction, Department 3 began investigating the tax affairs of 12 businesses belonging to the PQ Group. This was the biggest action in the past 5 years. The media and experts predicted that the giant PQ Group would not be able to weather the storm. Meanwhile, Sun and the PQ Group, while struggling, Dongdu tries to persuade He Rang to return to work. However, He Rang gives all sorts of reasons to resign and absolutely refuses to return to the department. Dongdu suddenly remembers the money he paid for He Rang's transportation earlier. She thinks Dongdu is a calculating person and immediately transfers 12,000 to him. Thinking everything is settled, Dongdu still insists on getting the remaining 200. He Rang was preparing to transfer the money. Dongdu said that wasn't what he meant. Dongdu wanted to use He Rang's debt as an excuse to ask her to handle some outstanding work. He had a plan that could be exchanged for 200. Dongdu made all sorts of offers, and finally He Rang agreed to help Dongdu, but once He Rang started working, his hands and feet couldn't stop. The plan had just been sent out when Dongdu arranged for another task. He Rang worked non-stop until he went crazy. It wasn't until the next morning that Dongdu finally contacted him. He Rang thought Dongdu was about to give him a new task, and he felt strangely excited. Unexpectedly, Dongdu changed his attitude. He asked He Jiang to go to Department 5 to complete the resignation procedures. It's unclear what Dongdu was thinking. On the other side, Wu Jiang was holding a stack of documents. These were documents given to him by the inspector. The documents documented a major event in Go House. A group of vested interests formed from several businesses. Currently, it can be confirmed that Sangdu Construction Company is one of them. Sangdu is Tezhen's father-in-law's company. This proves that Sun is more or less involved with GU, as suspected by the inspectors. The consecutive bankruptcies of Meng Electronics companies were manipulated by people behind the scenes within GU. Sangdu Construction Company probably keeps detailed records. Just obtaining those records could expose Tun's corruption. Avoiding the inspector seemed very excited. He asked Mr. Zhang NAC Dan to give Dongdu the financial report of Sangdu Construction to pique his curiosity. However, they had to remove Sangdu Construction's name from the list, but with his intelligence, Dongdu quickly guessed that this was Sangdu Construction's financial report. Although it was a powerful weapon to attack Tun, Dongdu didn't rejoice too soon. On the contrary, he had to be even more cautious. According to Dongdu's speculation, Lawyer PQ, Deputy Director Kim, and Director of Department 4 all harbored resentment towards Tsun. So Dongdu's use of Department 5 as an assistant to deal with Tsun was indeed the best option. Dongdu was still a little uneasy because the financial report appeared somewhat simplistic. Dongdu wondered who provided the documents and what their purpose was. The documents were provided by the inspectorate. Although the inspectorate held a handle on Sangdu Construction Company's weaknesses, they couldn't act on their own. Dongdu, after examining the entire National Tax Bureau, only found that avoiding inspection was the only thing capable of him. Having obtained Sangdu Construction's financial reports, he had been undercover in the Tax Bureau for 15 years, secretly plotting against T. Jun. At the same time, Dongdu had also been patient for 15 years. To find evidence to exonerate his father, he certainly needed complete information before he dared to act. Dongdu truly deserved the trust the inspectors placed in him. That evening, Dongdu went to see He Jiang. It was just a formality. The matter was merely an excuse. He advised He Jiang not to resign, but to find the reporter who wrote the article that year to clarify the situation regarding his family's case, and only then consider whether to stay or leave. Dongdu had done everything he could, now just waiting to see what He Rang would choose. He Rang hesitated for a long time, finally deciding to follow Dongdu's advice. She called a reporter to inquire about the Mdung electronic case from 15 years ago. The call brought back painful memories for He Rang. The reporter said that the person behind it all was Deputy Director Kim. She deceived both T. Jun and O. Jiang. When O. Jiang realized he had been deceived, he resigned and returned to the victim's house. Unexpectedly, the family had already turned themselves in, and the director only found He Jiang still alive. He quickly carried He Jiang to the hospital for emergency treatment. After learning the whole truth, He Jiang immediately sought out O. Jiang. She wanted to thank Wu Jiang for saving her mother. Wu Jiang didn't hold a grudge. He forgave He Jiang. The animosity between the two was finally resolved. The next day, shocking news rocked the entire city. A company called EQ had become the largest shareholder of the PQ Group. This company was aiming directly for control of the PQ Group. Rumors circulated that the person behind EQ was Tun. After seeing the news, Deputy Director Kim couldn't remain calm. She immediately requested that the investigation be avoided. If Tsun wasn't overthrown now, it would never be. The PQ Group was in a panic. They had lost their shares and couldn't even protect their management rights. The PQ lawyers had become the target of the vice president's anger. Fortunately, Deputy Director Kim had messaged him, allowing them to proceed as planned. She gave lawyer PQ a chance to turn the tables on T. Dunn. What more could he ask for? Meanwhile, T. Dunn wants to harm Sangdu Construction by conducting a tax investigation on a rival company. This will lead people to mistakenly believe that T. Dunn is siding with Sangdu Construction. Even the events of 15 years ago were revealed. Sun had brought down 27 businesses, led by Mung Electronics, causing an immediate public outcry. This should have been a good time to attack Sun. But Dongdu felt uneasy because everything happened so suddenly. Sun had kept it so well hidden, and now it was all exposed. It seemed someone was secretly manipulating things from behind. Dongdu advised Wu Jiang to calmly observe. Given the situation, they shouldn't act rashly. They should let others be the guinea pigs and see how Sun would react. However, Wu Jiang had patiently waited for many years, finally getting this opportunity, so how could he sit idly by and do nothing? At this time, the head of Department 4 came to see Tun. He was very curious why Jun hadn't dealt with Dongdu since Dongdu appeared. All their wicked deeds had been exposed. The head of Department 4 even thought that this incident was also caused by him. Those around Tun were successively defeated by his abilities, and they could certainly recognize who Dongdu was targeting.
Unexpectedly, Tun smiled.
He only wanted to use Dongdu to eliminate the head of Department 4. Hearing this, the head of Department 4 realized that Jun was indeed a devious person. Just because he knew the head of Department 4 was colluding with someone else, he immediately severed their previous relationship. Music. In the evening, Dongdu went to see Wu Jiang at the office. He still wanted Wu Jiang to reconsider. This wasn't the right time to attack Tun. But Wu Jiang's mind was made up, and Dongdu could only follow his opinion. They would conduct an investigation into the construction company, but this would be risky if they couldn't find evidence. Dongdu made a few initial requests, including meeting the whistleblower who said that Jun was colluding with the construction company, to ensure this person was not at fault. Next is the inspection to avoid scrutiny. The person constantly caught between Jun and Deputy Director Kim needs to determine whose side is on. To do this, Wu Jiang prepares for the inspection. An investigation of businesses, including those belonging to both Jun's and Deputy Director Kim's factions. After the inspection, the businesses are divided into two categories. One type of investigation involves Deputy Director Kim, mainly a procedural investigation. The other type involves Sun, and the investigation is being conducted rigorously, without any oversight. This proves that, avoiding the inspectors siding with Deputy Director Kim, the two necessary tasks have been completed, and Dongdu and Wu Jiang can now begin their actions. On the other side, Vice President Sun met with Tun. He told Sun that in this society there are no permanent enemies and no permanent friends. The Vice President hoped to end the conflict peacefully. Sun wanted to hear the conditions. After the Vice President listed them, Sun felt unsatisfied. He was about to leave. The Vice President stated another condition: help Tun eliminate Lawyer PQ and Deputy Director Kim. Only now did Jun feel a little interested. That evening, Dongdu returned home. He was quite cautious. Before acting, he had to consider all the possibilities of Deputy Director Kim daring to attack at this time, because he thought Tezen and the PQ Corporation had severed ties. But given Tun's personality, he wouldn't easily give up on PQ as it was a huge resource. Dong suspected Tun and the PQ lawyer were putting on a show. There was absolutely no rift between them. Their goal was to trap the Deputy Director. The next morning, Dongdu arrived at the office and immediately reported this matter to Wu Jiang. Wu Jiang's job was to determine the relationship between T. Jun and lawyer PQ. If they had truly broken up, then we could take decisive action. Otherwise, we should stop. Before T. Jun dealt a painful blow, Wu Jiang would verify the relationship. Dongdu would send people to investigate the construction site in Du. However, the elderly chairman is receiving treatment at the hospital, and all work is being handled by his son. Director S refuses to cooperate with Bureau 5, demanding that Dongdu obtain a search warrant. A dispute ensues between the two sides. Unexpectedly, Dongdu receives a call from Wu Jiang, who discovers that Tun is allied with Vice Chairman BQ. Their condition for cooperation is to eliminate Lawyer PQ, proving that the relationship between Sun and him has broken down. The Vice President is preparing to send money to Tun. This information was obtained by Wu Jiang from the director of the 3rd Bureau. It's very reliable. Dongdu has eliminated his worries and can finally proceed with a comprehensive investigation. First, they will search the construction site of the building. If Director Sale needed a search warrant, Dongdu would send someone to get it. Others would guard the finance office door to prevent the destruction of evidence. When the search warrant arrived, Bureau 5 would begin its operation, leaving this place to his colleagues. He rang to another location to investigate. When the two arrived at Sangdu's construction site, Dongdu discovered a significant problem. They haven't touched the places that should have been completed.
Dong du Sudenli fait Tunisie.
He suspected that the construction of Sangdu was no longer a business but merely a cover for some plan. Dongdu suspected it was related to Tun. He then immediately ran to find Tun. He asked if they should stop investigating Sangdu's construction. Although Tun's answer was vague, Dongdu could discern it from his eyes. Last time, Dongdu used Jun's buttons for an experiment. He clearly showed his longing for his wife. At that time, Jun didn't look into Dongdu's eyes. He confidently drew a conclusion. If Jun looks into Dongdu's eyes, he's lying. If he doesn't look, he's telling the truth. Now, Jun looks into Dongdu's eyes and says to stop the investigation, meaning he wants to continue. Dongdu drops his guard and freely turns Sangdu's building upside down, his colleagues carrying out the search warrant. The whistleblower is also taken to Bureau 5 for safekeeping. Dongdu immediately goes to Sangdu's building. On the way, Dongdu received information that Sangdu Construction had borrowed money from several private companies. The repayment deadline was today. Dongdu was extremely confused, not understanding what was going on, and could only quickly go to Sangdu Construction to carefully investigate every step. Meanwhile, Wu Jiang arrived at the headquarters of the newly emerging LQ company, and the results were astonishing. LQ is the property of lawyer PQ, and has no connection with Tsun. Wu Jiang realized, just as Dongdu predicted, they had been tricked badly by Tun. Tun and lawyer PQ hadn't broken up. Their relationship had remained as strong as a rock for so many years. Wu Jiang began to feel worried. Music. The police, with a search warrant, stormed into the finance office of Sangdu Construction and was stunned by the situation there. After 12 hours of construction, Sangdu will face the biggest bankruptcy in history. They falsified accounting records to borrow a large amount of money from private companies. If Sangdu Construction declares bankruptcy, those private companies will also suffer losses. This is a reenactment of the Electronic incident 15 years ago. Dongdu is extremely panicked and must quickly find Director S. But the problems they face are not just that. Wu Jiang received news that the person named Su Ju had jumped from the rooftop of the 5th Bureau. Wu Jiang rushed back, but the situation was beyond saving. He finally realized that everything was part of Jun's game and that he had no intention of stopping. At this time, Dongdu went to Director S's office. But no one was there. Dongdu discovers his father's black notebook on the table. It records a cruel truth. For the past 5 years, Dongdu has sought revenge for his father, only to find out that his father was the worst villain. Dongdu is completely defeated by the truth. It turns out that the father he thought was virtuous was secretly working for the PQ group. From within the National Tax Bureau, he helped PQ cover up many dirty deeds. In contrast, Tezen was a very upright man, not bowing to power, not succumbing to money. Tun's wife was seriously ill and bedridden, but he had no money to pay for her hospital bills. Jun sought help from his father-in-law, but unexpectedly, his father-in-law also pressured him. If Jun didn't help build the tax evading ship, he shouldn't expect to receive the money. Jun didn't want to go against his conscience. His father-in-law heartlessly watched his daughter die without contributing a single penny. This was the final straw that completely broke Jun. After his wife passed away, Jun was no longer as strong as before. He transformed into a different person. Jun agreed with Dongdu's father to help him deal with the aftermath of the Mdung electronic crime case. Dongdu's father personally planned it. Unexpectedly, after the Mdung electronic crime case, a family chose to take matters into their own hands. That day, Dongdu's father was the first to arrive at the scene, saw someone dead, and then quietly left. Only then did Dongdu's father learn that the youngest daughter of that family was still alive. She was Hirang. If only Dongdu's father had chosen to save people like Wu Jiang, perhaps Hirang's entire family could have survived. But life doesn't offer IFS, so Dongdu carried his disappointment in his father, sadly walking down the street. Later, Hirang came to the SEO director's office to find Dongdu, and she also saw the blacklist on the desk. Knowing that the person responsible for the family's deaths was Dongdu's father, Jun felt immense pain. But the most pitiable person was Jun. He knew the whole truth and endured it all patiently. After his wife's death, the inspector told Jun the truth. Everything was a conspiracy by Dongdu's father, with the aim of bringing Jun down. Initially, Jun didn't believe it because he always considered Dongdu's father a good friend. But by chance, perhaps by fate, Tae-jun found Dong-doo's father's black book. Finally, he was able to confirm that the inspector's words were not false. From then on, Tae-jun decided to change himself, sparing no expense to avenge his wife. Back to reality, Sun held a press conference revealing to the media that Sangdu Construction had received an illegal loan from Sancho Bank. There was no collateral or security. The only condition was that Sangdu Construction find a reason to frame Sun.
Why Sangdu Construction?
Because it's Sun's father-in-law's company. What better reason than to help his father-in-law evade taxes than to let the construction company that borrowed money from him be the deputy director of Sancho Bank, who is also the husband of Deputy Director Kim? If they can use this opportunity to get Tae-jun demoted, it will greatly benefit Deputy Director Kim. After the construction company receives the money, they will intentionally declare bankruptcy. Sancho Bank will not suffer significant losses, but the private companies that lent money to the construction company will go bankrupt as well. This damage is immeasurable. Furthermore, Deputy Director Kim is also linked with PQ. After the private companies go bankrupt, PQ will buy them back at a cheap price. Deputy Director Kim also receives a huge amount of bribe money. Sun's compelling arguments quickly stirred up public opinion. It's true that Sun is incredibly skillful. With just one precise move, he eliminated all his opponents. The investigation bureau's wrongdoing collapsed, and the construction company went bankrupt. Deputy Director Kim was forced to resign. BQ was forced to take over the investigation. Now, Wu Jiang realizes he made a mistake from the very first move, trusting Inspector Zheng. Wu Jiang goes to Inspector Zheng and asks why he went to such lengths. It turns out Inspector Zheng also wants revenge. The Mdung electronic case that year caused the company of Inspector Tran's brother to go bankrupt. He has been waiting for an opportunity until now. Oh Jang is extremely disappointed because he thought Inspector Tran was a good friend. Currently, Bureau 5 still has one chance to turn the tables. They just need to find Director S to prevent the construction of the bankrupt company. If they can prove Tun's argument wrong, the situation can be reversed. The problem is that Dong-do is currently devastated. He can't accept his father's true face. Dong-do looks at the watch his father gave him and angrily throws it to the ground. Meanwhile, Tae-jun visits his father-in-law at the hospital. By now, he has nothing left to hide. Director Seo has been manipulated by Tae-jun for a long time. He hoped his father-in-law could take care of his health and not die prematurely from anger, at least to see how Sangdu's construction would collapse. His father-in-law was so angry he was speechless. After returning from the hospital, Dong-do went to see Tae-jun. He wanted to know one thing: why did Tae-jun have to go to such lengths? The reason is that he wanted to see Dong-do's reaction when he learned his father's true face. Dong-do's current appearance reminded Tae-jun of the last time he met Dong-do's father. At that time, Dong-do was an accountant helping businesses falsify documents to evade taxes and engage in illegal activities. Tae-jun desperately needed Dong-do's father's blacklist, and his only weakness was Dong-do's future. If Dong-do's father didn't hand over the blacklist, Tae-jun would ruin Dong-do. Dong-do's father knew that Tae-jun wanted revenge, and he was blinded by hatred, becoming a fallen man. Dong-do's father understood that he also bore some responsibility, but the greatest responsibility still belonged to Tun. He failed to maintain his integrity. If he had no ambition, why would Tun go to Sangdu to conspire with the SE director against his father-in-law? Why would he approach the core figure of the PQ Corporation? Didn't Tun already have a desire to become the leader? Whether it's Dong-do's father or his deceased wife, they are just pretexts for Tun to reveal his true nature. This is the path he chose himself.
Unexpectedly, Dong-du's attitude changed.
He had been suffering from the truth all this time, but after thinking it through, there's no problem anymore. Even though Dong-do's father is a bad person, Dong-do isn't a good person either. Nobody in this world is completely good. But the worst person in this whole thing is still Tae-jun. He didn't expect Dong-do to change so quickly, and to speak so impolitely. Dong-do wants Tae-jun to wait and see what he will do to expose his true face. Don't continue playing the victim. On the other side, the former head of Department 3 has moved to Department 5, and is currently working at the supervisory board. He is specifically investigating the case of the whistleblower suicide. According to the whistleblower's wife's report, Dong-do threatened the whistleblower, and he was taken to the supervisory board for questioning. Finally, the former head of Department 3 has a chance for revenge, but Dong-do is not afraid of being investigated. If the former head of Department 3 wants to know anything, just ask. I will cooperate fully. After completing the report, Dong-do calmly left and quickly returned to rejoin Department 5. According to Dong-do's observations, everything is currently going according to Tun's plan. Department 5 is in trouble and unable to recover. Wu Jiang has been dismissed, and Deputy Director Kim has also resigned. Tencent no longer has any competitors. Dongdu and everyone else still haven't figured out a way to turn the situation around. Should they just let things go according to Tun's plan? On the PQ Group side, the vice president has been arrested and taken to the prosecutor's office after a comprehensive investigation that Tun conducted targeting the PQ Group. The PQ lawyer successfully seized power under the guise of the chairman's abandoned child. The first thing the PQ lawyer did after taking power was to summon several shareholders. They will cooperate to bring down the vice president completely. Lawyer PQ offered 10 billion for the cooperation. The shareholders hesitated a little, so he started lowering the price. When the price dropped to 1 billion, the shareholders couldn't sit still any longer. They hastily agreed to lawyer PQ's conditions. At this point, Dongdu and He Jiang tried to reverse the situation. According to information, He Jiang discovered that the man who had just committed suicide was involved in illegal international business. This reminded Dongdu of his father's blacklist, which contained extremely important information. Lawyer PQ was an illegitimate child from Japan. Chairman PQ didn't see through this, which is why he let him take control of PQ. Logically, South Korean conglomerates wouldn't allow foreigners to be in charge. Lawyer PQ could be the secret weapon to defeat Sun. If his citizenship is fake, he could be immediately deported. Breaking the partnership between Sun and Lawyer PQ, and using this to damage their relationship, is a truly audacious idea. However, this can't be rushed. The urgent matter now is to resolve the bankruptcy of Sangdu Construction. We cannot allow the Mdung electronic case to repeat itself. Wu Jiang is also busy. He used his persuasive skills to convince Du Han to side with Bureau 5. Du Han had already had this intention, and Wu Jiang wanted to ask Du Han for a favor. According to information, Su Jiao has a daughter who has severed ties with her father. Du Han's mission was to go to his daughter's house to find out the specific situation. However, Du Han didn't meet his daughter, only his nephew. The child looked quite pitiful, seemingly neglected. Du Han took the child to buy food and then called Oh Zhang. Oh Zhang asked Du Han to continue monitoring the family, certain that his daughter knew something. At this point, the vice president went to see lawyer PQ, and it turned out they were half-brothers. The vice president wondered what benefit lawyer PQ would gain from harming him. The chairman was still alive. With the small number of shares lawyer PQ held, he couldn't completely control PQ. However, the vice president had underestimated lawyer PQ. His goal wasn't just to bring down the vice president, but also the chairman. At this point, lawyer PQ had nothing left to hide. It turns out he came to PQ for revenge. At 20 years old, lawyer PQ worked as a laborer in Haido, picking up golf balls under the scorching sun every day just to earn a little money for living expenses. One day he heard that the chairman of PQ would be coming to play golf. Lawyer PQ suddenly felt an urge to see what his father looked like. Lawyer PQ and his mother were abandoned by the chairman when they were young, wandering the streets, and his mother was even abused by beggars. Lawyer PQ hated his father intensely, but he also harbored some hope that Chairman PQ would transform him from a poor vagrant into a wealthy heir. Unfortunately, Lawyer PQ was too naive. The heartless father didn't even glance at him, and even for a small mistake, the chairman ordered Lawyer PQ to be fired. From then on, he decided he had to trample his father under his feet. On the other side, the former head of Department 3 began to take action. When taking Dongdu for questioning, he installed a listening device in Dongdu's phone. Through this, the former head of Department 3 learned that Dongdu's office contained an important document. While Department 5 was dealing with Sangdu Construction's affairs, the former head of Department 3 broke into the office and stole the document. On the other hand, Department 5 wanted to prevent Sangdu Construction from going bankrupt, and they first had to solve the financial problem. Dongdu discovered that Sangdu Construction still had some unsold land, estimated to fetch around 7 trillion, but currently, they couldn't sell it at that price. Only a few companies are taking advantage of the situation, wanting to buy back the land cheaply, but if they can sell it, the bankruptcy crisis will be basically resolved. However, what they lack most right now is time. Selling land takes several days for paperwork. Building a luxury villa only takes 12 hours to settle the loan, and half of that is already gone. Another option is to sell the company. I heard someone wants to buy it, but nobody knows that person is lawyer PQ. What exactly is his scheme? A few days later, Dongdu was investigated again. He was wearing a formal suit, clearly preparing to reveal his hand again like last time. Avoiding the inspector and Du Han also came to investigate. The former head of Department 3 led his men in. Dongdu still showed no emotion. This time even T Jun came to watch the fun. Dong-do was in big trouble. The former head of Department 3 distributed documents to everyone and asked Do-han for his opinion. He thought Do-han would side with him and together they would crush Dong-do, but the result was beyond everyone's imagination. Unexpectedly, Do-han helped Dong-do, which slightly confused the former head of Department 3. He used video evidence to accuse Dong-do of threatening the whistleblower. Yongju Olis Mai. Everything had been arranged by him. Now was the time to begin the counterattack. The spearhead was aimed at Inspector Tran. Dong-do asked Inspector Tran about his relationship with the whistleblower's wife. Inspector Tran said he didn't know her. Dong-do immediately took the call transcript. Inspector Thuong and the complainant's wife had contacted each other many times. Yet they still claimed not to know each other. Inspector Thuong immediately felt tense. He tried to calmly explain that as an official of the National Tax Agency, he often received phone calls from taxpayers. He assumed the complainant's wife was among them. Dong took the phone of the whistleblower's wife, which had the inspector's phone number saved on it. A single call would clarify everything. The inspector's phone rang with a note from the whistleblower's wife, yet he dared to lie and say he was a taxpayer. The inspector was exposed, and the situation became quite embarrassing. He continued to justify himself, saying that the content of the complaint was problematic, so he met with the complainant's wife for a private investigation. Yongju produced a video clip. On the day Dong-do met with the complainant, he discovered that the inspector was also present, and the inspector had deleted the relevant surveillance footage. If Dong-do said he forced the whistleblower to his death, then what was the purpose of avoiding the inspector from doing something shady? To avoid making the inspector anxious, because if he stayed, it would cause a big problem. He was preparing to leave when the whistleblower's daughter arrived. She could prove that the inspector had threatened her parents, and she even had evidence. To the unexpected, Inspector Do-han was clearly punished for Dong-do's investigation, and he even had to thank Chief Do-han. He not only helped Dong-do but also brought the accuser's daughter to testify. However, Do-han faced a difficult problem. Helping Dong-do meant offending Tun. How should he handle this father-son relationship? On the other hand, the Sangdu construction issue has been resolved. The company's shareholders' meeting has been suspended. The purpose of suspending the shareholders' meeting is simple. He Rang discovered that the person wanting to buy Sangdu Construction is lawyer PQ, but the purpose of the acquisition is not to save the company. Sangdu Construction and PQ have always had business dealings, so Sangdu Construction holds 5% of PQ shares. If these shares belong to lawyer PQ, he would have complete control over the PQ group. However, lawyer PQ's plan was seen through by Bureau 5. At this point, Dong-do had won big, while lawyer PQ had suffered a devastating defeat. Not only did he fail to acquire the shares of Sangdu Construction, but Deputy Director Kim even took responsibility for the failure. She admitted that her husband had an improper transaction with lawyer PQ. Deputy Director Kim announced she would resign and actively cooperate with the investigation. Although Deputy Director Kim admitted guilt, she was actually creating a way out for herself. As for Tun, lawyer PQ's failure made him uncomfortable. After all, the two had a working relationship. However, Tun still had a trump card up his sleeve, inciting his subordinates to protest. In front of the National Tax Bureau, they slandered Deputy Director Kim, accusing him of having poor character, and furthermore, criticized the Fifth Bureau for abusing its power, music, arbitrarily entering businesses to investigate, and for corruption and tax evasion in the construction of luxury hotels. The protesters wanted the highest-ranking leaders to take responsibility. Wu Jiang was worried that the head of the Tax Bureau was uneasy, so he quickly called to reassure him. Wu Jiang guaranteed that he would handle the situation properly. He would definitely not let the construction company go bankrupt. If any problems arose, Wu Jiang would also take full responsibility. He would not abandon the director. But the director was a smart man. Whether it was Deputy Director Kim's decline or Tun's betrayal, he saw it all clearly. The only mistake the director made was thinking that ignoring it was the best solution. To put it bluntly, the director was unwise in his use of personnel. Initially, he planned to pit Jun and Deputy Director Kim against each other to test their abilities. The director ended up digging his own grave. When things escalated to this point, he had to take responsibility. Now the director can only rely on Wu Jiang to roll up his sleeves and solve the immediate problem. The director will help him with the final steps before he resigns from this position. In the evening, Dong-do went to see lawyer PQ. According to the information he had, before 2002, lawyer PQ was always neglected in Japan. After 2002, Chairman PQ fell ill and wanted to find his blood relatives. At that time, lawyer PQ went to flatter the chairman and was fortunate enough to be kept by his side. The problem is, as an illegitimate child, What benefit could lawyer PQ gain from PQ? However, Dong-do thought of a problem. Dong-do's father had long held a trump card to defeat lawyer PQ. By chance, Dong-do discovered that the watch his father gave him contained a secret inside. The contents of the memory card were the real trump card. 20 years ago, lawyer PQ was still in Japan. The stepfather was an alcoholic who frequently beat the mother of lawyer PQ. One day, the mother resisted and stabbed the stepfather in the throat with a knife, but the cause of death was suffocation. According to the witness's description, lawyer PQ returned and set the house on fire that year. The problem is that lawyer PQ has an alibi, while his stepfather's biological son committed theft at the same time. He claims to have been with lawyer PQ. The two cases occurred in two different areas. From the police's perspective, the biological son's testimony is more convincing. After all, the deceased was his biological father. Lawyer PQ was unexpectedly acquitted of murder, and his biological son is the credit manager at Goldcat, always by his side. Their relationship is very complex, a combination of partnership and bitter enmity. Even a small impact could shatter their relationship, and both would face a life-or-death situation. Dong-do's father spoke with the credit manager early on and recorded evidence. Today, Dong-do brought evidence to lawyer PQ not to prosecute him, but to demand that he hand over evidence related to Tun. Dong-do has only one enemy. Dong-do is also very shrewd. He gave the evidence of lawyer PQ's crimes to Tun. If lawyer PQ doesn't act first, Tun will eventually deal with him. Actually, Dong-do's purpose was to make the two of them fight each other, but lawyer PQ wasn't easily fooled. He didn't believe Tae-jun would dare to touch him. At this critical moment, the vice president went to see Tun, and in this desperate situation, he offered an attractive condition. As long as Tae-jun sided with him, not only would he be the director of the National Tax Bureau, but Tae-jun could even become president if he wanted to. Conversely, the vice president's condition was only one: to eliminate lawyer PQ. Tun hesitated a little. After all, lawyer PQ was no longer of any use to him. After the two left the restaurant, the colleague from Bureau 5, sent by Dong-do to monitor them, took a photo and sent it to lawyer PQ. On the other side, lawyer PQ was taken away by the prosecutor. Unexpectedly, he received the photo. Knowing that Tae-jun was secretly meeting with the vice president, lawyer PQ realized he had been betrayed. This was actually a move by Dong-do. If lawyer PQ is pushed into a desperate situation, he will certainly use his cards to deal with Tae-jun. The prosecutor deliberately let lawyer PQ escape and then had someone follow him. There are also people from Bureau 5. With lawyer PQ pushed to this point, he will certainly confront Tae-jun, and a conflict may even occur. Just catching them both red-handed would have been perfect. Lawyer PQ contacted Tun, and after just a few sentences, they had a heated argument. Unexpectedly, lawyer PQ sent a video clip, and Tae-jun immediately pulled over to the side of the road to watch it. His colleagues from Bureau 5 also parked their cars to observe. Tae-jun seemed tense. He couldn't believe lawyer PQ had the video. Tae-jun killed Dong-do's father. Tae-jun immediately became furious. He arranged to meet lawyer PQ at the place where Dong-do's father had the accident. The beginning would also be the end of everything. It seems someone has to die tonight. Lawyer PQ brought a knife. At the same time, Hee Jiang made a new discovery. Director S had just used a credit card at a bar. However, He rang couldn't find Director S, but instead found Goldcat, the credit director. Unexpectedly, he was still alive and had even become Director SS Man. At this moment, Lawyer PQ arrived at the meeting point. The prosecutor and tax bureau staff watched from a distance. Lawyer PQ parked his car very carefully, avoiding a surprise attack from Tae-jun. Time ticked by, but Tae-jun still hadn't appeared. Dong-do, upon hearing the news of Irang's death and learning that the credit director was still alive, immediately realized the seriousness of the situation. Following the Goldcat credit incident, Lawyer PQ sent people to apprehend the credit director. Although it's unknown how he survived, his relationship with Lawyer PQ has been broken, compounded by the credit director's bitter feud. Taking advantage of this, Toon sends the credit director to deal with Lawyer PQ, giving the two a chance to end their conflict. Dong-do wants to call Lawyer PQ to inform him, but he doesn't answer the phone, making things increasingly complicated. On the other side, Director Tin Dung appeared, without hesitation charging at Lawyer PQ. The car door was blocked by Lan, preventing Lawyer PQ from getting out. Director Tin Dung rammed the car a few more times, but Lawyer PQ's car didn't move, so he decided to get out and fight Lawyer PQ. Lawyer PQ was caught off guard. Music. Why is the dead man here? Now there's no time to think, he has to save himself first. As the two men were locked in a fierce struggle, police sirens blared. Taking advantage of the credit manager's distraction, lawyer PQ drew his knife and killed his opponent, claiming self-defense to the police. But the credit manager didn't give lawyer PQ the chance. When the handbrake was released, a slight press of the gas pedal would send the car plunging into the ravine, killing both men. This means that lawyer PQ, carrying the incriminating evidence against Sun, has disappeared. Dong-do is extremely disappointed. Sun can rest assured, but he remains vigilant. Sun has a question in his mind. How did lawyer PQ get the black box from his car? The next day, Dong-do begins investigating the credit manager. He had an unauthorized phone, with a message containing the address and password. This was the key to the credit manager's house, but the phone wasn't his. Surely he knew where his own house was? After the credit manager disappeared, 2 Goldcat credit employees also went missing. One of them was found dead at the credit manager's house. Based on Dong-do's speculation, this phone might belong to the other 2 employees. They were tasked with eliminating the credit manager, but an incident occurred en route, and one employee was bribed by parasitic worms. He then eliminated his teammate and saved the credit manager. The credit manager's case has been clarified, but there's still one question. How did lawyer PQ know? Taesun killed Dong-do's father. That night, Dong-do tossed and turned, finally figuring out the crux of the matter. Taesun and lawyer PQ collaborated because of the blacklist. If the blacklist contained evidence of lawyer PQ's crimes, he would inevitably be threatened by Taesun. Therefore, to maintain the upper hand, lawyer PQ had to plant a spy beside Taesun. And that person was none other than the credit manager. That's how he obtained the video of Taesun committing the crime. The answer is obvious. Considering the actions of the credit manager, one realizes that when his life is threatened, the first thing to do is not to flee but to go home and pack his belongings. That's not a wise choice. Unless what the credit manager needs to take with him isn't clothes and money, but something that could save his life. For example, evidence related to Tun's crime. The next day, Dong-do searched the credit manager's house thoroughly and then arranged to meet Tun. He said he had video evidence of Tun's father. Dong-do gave Tun 2 choices, either confess or lose all his reputation. However, Tun was not easily convinced to plead guilty. He claimed that Dong-do was just talking without any evidence. He knew all of Dong-do's tricks by heart. Despite saying that, Tae-jun still felt worried. He immediately sent people to search for Dong-do's belongings. However, his subordinates searched everywhere but couldn't find anything. Tae-jun felt even more confused. Afterwards, Tae-jun went to see the former head of Department 3. Through his words, Tae-jun learned that Dong-do had gone to the credit manager's house, but the credit manager's house had been searched twice by the police, and nothing was found. Therefore, Dong-do must have lied to Tae-jun. He decided to accelerate the plan. Only by bankrupting the construction company could he punish Bureau 5, and then use the opportunity to force the head of the tax bureau to resign. Sun needed to do 2 things. First, he needed to instruct businesses not to help the construction company. Second, he needed to prevent Bureau 5 from finding the sales director. The former head of Bureau 3 was in charge of the sales director. As for the businesses, Sun was personally in charge. Under Sun's warning, businesses that could potentially lend money to the construction company dared not act rashly. When the situation reached a deadlock, Hyun once again approached Sun. She issued an ultimatum. If Sun did not confess, she would publicly release the video of him committing murder. Sun was provoked, his previous confidence completely gone. What would he decide? At the same time, Dong-do was still actively searching for Director S, but without success. Dong-do decided to change tactics, not looking for the person, but for money. Director S is from a wealthy family and spends money lavishly. Currently, his assets are frozen, so he must have other ways to make money. Dong-do investigated several lending companies. Although the employees didn't remember the director, there was one person who frequently visited, a woman wearing glasses. Based on this clue, the police quickly apprehended Director Seo. This means Tun's plan failed, but the director doesn't need to resign. Sun was furious. He summoned the former director of Department 3 to reprimand him. The former director of Department 3 quickly explained that Department 5 needed to complete 2 tasks to avoid punishment from the supervisory board. One was to complete the acquisition and construction of the luxury hotel, and the other was to recover the full 45 billion won in taxes. Finding the sales director only solves the tax evasion problem. Sun was directly involved in the acquisition issue. If Department 5 can't handle it, then the punishment for Department 5 will continue. Sun temporarily trusts the former Department 3 director one more time. Tomorrow is the final day to punish Department 5. If they fail, then the former Department 3 director deserves to die. Later, The unfilial son comes to visit Sun. Do-hun told Tun that the position of department head was within his grasp, and he would support his father at all costs. Unexpectedly, while Tae-jun was resting, Do-hun secretly entered the office to look at the computer. However, Tae-jun soon discovered his unfilial son's attempt to deceive him. Do-hun felt ashamed. Tae-jun wanted him to handle it himself. Although Do-hun wanted to save Bureau 5 would be disbanded tomorrow. Do-hun would certainly be transferred elsewhere. He really didn't want this to happen. The decisive day arrived in the blink of an eye. Tae-jun received a video. When Dong-do left the credit director's house, evidence was indeed found. Tae-jun immediately became uneasy. He called the former head of Bureau 3 to inquire about the progress of punishing Bureau 5. The former head of Bureau 3 said everything was going smoothly. Department 5 is doing a great job. There's no reason to punish them. Tae-dun was speechless. He never expected that the former head of Department 3 would betray him. Why would the former head of Department 3 do that? It turned out that on the day the former head of Department 3 stole Dong-do's belongings, the entire theft process was unfortunately recorded. If he doesn't cooperate with Bureau 5 to set a trap for Sun, Bureau 5 will report Sun to the police. Dong-do has been waiting for him for a long time. Sun still has a question. He has warned all the businesses that could potentially acquire Dong-do Construction. Who would dare to risk opposing him? Dong-do calmly replied, "It's PQ Construction, a small branch of the PQ Group. If they could merge Sang-do Construction and PQ Construction, they could completely separate themselves from the conglomerate. Such a huge benefit, PQ Construction certainly wouldn't pass it up." Having resolved Tun's doubts, Dong-do began to count his crimes. Corruption, of course, goes without saying. Instigating the credit director to hire lawyer PQ, abandoning Dong-do's father when he had an accident. The situation had reached this point. Tae-jun could no longer remain stubborn. Finally, he admitted everything he had done. Revenge was merely a pretext for Tae-jun to climb higher, stemming from his deep-seated ambition. He realized his mistake too late. His hands were already stained with blood. There was no turning back. Dong-do took out his phone and showed him another video clip from the day of the accident. That day, after Tae-jun left, lawyer PQ and the credit director arrived at the scene. Dong-do's father's car didn't actually fall. Lawyer PQ intentionally pushed it down. When Tae-jun learned the truth, he almost collapsed. He had been deceived by lawyer PQ for 5 years, colluding with him to commit numerous crimes. Dong-do reminded Tae-jun to pay attention to the image. Because the conversation so far has been live-streamed. Everyone knows Jun's true face. His career is completely over. There is no chance of saving him. Before being caught, Tae-jun chose to end his own life, and Dong-do also publicly revealed his blacklist. Although it ruined his father's reputation, that was the punishment he deserved. Actually, after Tae-jun left the accident scene, he immediately called the police, hoping they could save Dong-do's father. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, the car had already been pushed into the lake by lawyer PQ. Tae-jun mistakenly thought he had abandoned his friend, and continued to make mistakes until it was irreversible. Dong-do finally achieved his goal and calmly left the National Tax Bureau. Although his colleagues still felt some regret, they respected his decision. A year later, in the election for the director of the National Tax Bureau, Woo Jiang became the strongest candidate. This was entirely deserved given what he had done. Meanwhile, Dong-do also started working in a small office. Although he didn't earn much money, he felt at peace. Paying taxes is the responsibility of every citizen, helping the state easily manage businesses and preventing inflation of money for those with malicious intentions to exploit. Don't evade taxes for a small benefit. It will lead to you not seeing the sunlight one day, like the accountants, for example. The movie has ended here. Thank you everyone for watching until the end.